Alright everybody, welcome back to another stream where we are in dialogues and notes that we find around the game, comparing it to the Japanese version of the text and seeing what difference. I had mentioned at one point throughout the stream that if you take 5 of you, we still had the chance to talk to the real Yosefka, so off stream I went ahead and just went through the effort of using 4 of her vials to... The first thing I'm going to do for today is go ahead and use the 5th vial, or grab the 5th vial and use it and see what her special dialogue is. So I'm not sure if it'll trigger immediately after I take it, so I might need to reload the game again, or reload the area again, but this will be a pretty rare occurrence for most plays of the game, I think, because most people aren't going to talk to Yosefka 5 times to get her vials.
Ah, you are safe. Thank goodness. But I'm afraid nothing will change my mind. I cannot open the door. I'll do what I can, of course. Perhaps this will help you, if only in some small way. This night is long, but morning always comes. Someone of your caliber won't fail us, I am certain. Then I can finally see what you look like. I shouldn't be thinking this, but I am rather looking forward to it. So please, be careful out there.
So that is her special dialogue right there. It does seem a little bit suggestive, a little bit romantic in its nature. I think that still gets across in the English. It's slightly stronger in Japanese, but not terribly so. That dialogue she'll say regardless of the player's gender. I did think for a second that there was the potential that it could have been gender dialogue, but no, it's the same for both. So that pretty much sums up everything you can do in this area. And since we defeated the Cleric Beast yesterday, we're just going to go proceed through the aqueduct area of the game and proceed with the story from that point on. So coming up the ladder again, we don't get that cry of the Cleric Beast that we had earlier. We already exhausted Gilbert's dialogue for now, so I'm not going to worry about it again. I may as well go ahead and farm a few of the blood vials since I'm already this way, and that's not good. Ooh, I thought he was going to get me. So we get some more of those free Quicksilver bullets. I probably could have just gone the other way, or just gotten the bullets first. But it's okay. So there was that shortcut that initially brought us to this area by like the dog kennels. I neglected to go over there just because I was trying to unlock the other areas first in the shortcut. But this is like the more direct route towards the aqueduct area. And while it does seem certainly monstrous to an extent for like a dispatching these dogs that are in their cages. It's kind of a necessary thing to do if you're trying to free either their blood echoes or, you know, just not leave so many rabid dogs lying about inside.
Well, do you know of any safe places?
Unfortunately, we do not know of any safe places now, so...
I've heard I have. Shutting up indoors isn't always enough. Well, if you hunters got off your arses, you wouldn't be in this mess. You're obligated to help me, you hear? So what'll it be? Are you going to tell me you're not?
Unfortunately, we do not know of any safe places at this time.
Yeah, I should have known. You're good for nothing. No respect for the elderly is what that is. Yeah. Fat lot of good you outsiders do. Go on, admit it. You think we're all mad, don't you? Well, go and stop it. I know all your tricks.
So I think her lines are translated very well, really gets the intent behind the Japanese across very naturally in English.
Now what is it now? I've much better ways to pass the time. Unless you found me a nice safe place. Yeah, I should have known. You're good for nothing. Yeah. Fat little...
So we are still useless to her because we do not know of a safe location. And, that kind of thing will be revealed to us as we proceed through the game. Coming into the next area, we are going to arrive in a dry docks. It's filled with a bunch of barrels and caskets or coffins. And there will be like a patrolling Yharnamite, a large hunter mob, wielding what looks to be like a kind of saw and a torch. So despite being transformed into a beast, like these guys still use tools and things like that. They have some more of a presence of mind than say like a scourge beast, perhaps. And then this is a little bit of like a hidden area, or we can get to the rafters of the dry docks. Like down below, we can see like a few like canoes almost at the bottom of a dried out area. Some more cold blood dew. And suspended from the ceiling on like these chains, we've got hanged men, and they're carrying items, and by hitting them you can knock them down and then loot the items a bit later. So there's nothing over there. Let's go back, get the other item. And then there's like a kind of window that's hidden behind the barrels here where we can encounter one of our first friendly NPCs.
Oh, a hunter, are you? And an outsider? What a mess you've been caught up in. And tonight of all nights. Here, to welcome the new hunter. Prepare yourself for the worst. There are no humans left. They're all flesh-hungry beasts now.
So Eileen gives us the bold hunter's marks, which is interesting in that she knows that it can be of aid to the hunter. Her Japanese is pretty similar. A slight like flavor difference would be, instead of saying like welcome to the new hunter, she says here's like a parting gift to my kohai, and kohai is like someone who's like a junior to someone in a position, whether that's like a school year or like part of a company, something like that, is sharing like the same kind of background. So this establishes Eileen as a kind of mentor-esque figure for the hunter. She's performed our job before, and so we should be able to trust her to kind of guide us along our path as we proceed. The final bit of her dialogue about there are no humans left, they're all flesh-hungry beasts now, is pretty interesting. It can be a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not Eileen is saying that the beasts are no longer humans, or whether or not like the humans have become beasts. I phrased that a little bit poorly, but just there are no more humans left because they're beasts, and so beasts should not be considered human. Might be what she's trying to say, but it could also be taken that there aren't any people anymore, and the only thing that's out there are beasts, and that isn't necessarily connected if you don't know any better. Although, since we're pretty familiar with the game, we should know what she means by that.
Still lingering about. What's wrong? A hunter unnerved by a few beasts? No matter. Without fear in our hearts, we're little different from the beasts themselves.
We get a gesture from her, and that line right there, no matter, without fear in our hearts, we're a little different from the beasts themselves, I think is very important in understanding that Eileen's understanding of the world isn't as I don't know, as grounded as we might initially believe, since she's our senior, our senpai, so to speak, and that is definitely on display when we look at some of the descriptions for like the Molotov cocktails that say that certain beasts have an abhorrent or abnormal fear of flame. When we wield our torches next to the beast patients later on, we'll see that they'll recoil in fear. So this idea that fear separates beast from man is something that it seems many of the characters in the world believe, but it's pretty unsubstantiated when you really get into the nitty-gritty of the actual game and the world itself. So this may have been what led to Lawrence's downfall. He thought perhaps just having like fear or respect for the blood would be enough to prevent him from like succumbing to a beastly fate if he even knew about it, but it's a little bit up in the air like how much they initially knew. We do know that at some point the Healing Church was certainly made aware of what the blood causes people to transform into, and they continue to imbibe it regardless.
What are you still doing here? Enough trembling in your boots. A hunter must hunt. What are you still doing here?
And so that's the end of her dialogue. Her final line for there in Japanese is, instead of like a hunter must hunt, it says like hunting beasts cannot be helped. So that's a little bit of a difference, that Eileen is saying that we should hunt beasts specifically as opposed to people in the Japanese, whereas it's not quite as implied in the English, which is perfectly fine, but I just like to highlight those kinds of differences when I can. So it looks like that hunter mob was wielding like a kind of like spear almost. I'm not entirely sure what that weapon is. And then in close vicinity we have like the normal Yharnamite hunter mobs as well. Still need to think of a decent enough nickname to help me distinguish between the enemies. So we get a bloodstone shard. That should be enough to help upgrade the weapon now. And so these like little contraptions here would normally be to help lift and lower boats so that they could be repaired. And so feasibly, like, the water level should be able to rise pretty high in this area, but it seems to have been emptied for the night of the hunt. Maybe not necessarily for the night of the hunt itself, but just that was the state that it was in when this night began. So down below, we can see some of the corpses that we knocked down, as well as some rats. And I always forget which side has the spear. I think it's the left side, but even though I try to tell myself to remember which was which, I never remember for sure. So yeah, this is the Saw Spear, which is pretty similar to the Saw Cleaver, but it's more like a skill or dexterity kind of build for it. That was weird. Alright, so let's examine our new weapon. So the Saw Spear is one of the trick weapons of the workshop, commonly used by those who dedicate themselves to the hunt. This saw, effective at drawing the blood of beasts, transforms into a medium-range spear. The saw, with its set of bloodletting teeth, has become a symbol of the hunt, and only grows in effectiveness the more grotesquely transformed the beast. Let me just double check the Japanese on that. So yeah, this is pretty similar to the cleaver, and the only like notable difference would be instead of like saying it grows in effectiveness the more grotesquely transformed the beast, it just says it's effective against those who have transformed into like hideous things. So there isn't like a necessarily like that's just more of like a flavor thing than anything else. One of the unfortunate parts about like coming through this area is you can't immediately get back up to where we dropped down, so you have to navigate your way through the canal and back up. I mean, it's a very small backtrack, all things considered, but it's slightly annoying. And there's nothing over here. I think that guy must have fallen down, because I don't think he's normally down here. And then another beast just fell down there. That's really interesting. Haven't really seen that happen too much before. And that guy's just stabbing in the air. Alright, so lots of weirdness going on for now, but we'll deal with it. So some more corpses of humans, a bunch of barrels in this area, and some more of like the kind of lantern-esque statues, for lack of a better description. I will come back around that way. I'm just going to clear out some of the enemies. Then we get some carrion crows as well. In my pro strat for like going down onto beams is to line up the character's head with the platform that you're trying to walk towards. Did it go back up the ladder? It's weird. Oh yeah. So, which side did it go down? Okay. If I remember correctly, like this item isn't very important whatsoever, but just for the sake of completion. Two bloodstone shards. So it's actually not too bad. It just becomes a bit redundant later on when you get flush with the bloodstone shards. I suppose it's good if you're like trying to upgrade like the spear that you just got, especially if you are like on your first playthrough and don't know like a whole lot of the weapons very well or what build you want to go with, but it's certainly not unwelcome. Hey Q, it's nice to see you again, man. Thanks for dropping by. So we already came through this area yesterday. These have like the drowned corpses. I'm probably not going to deal with them too much. Just going to highlight that this area does connect into where we were before. Although hitting these things is pretty satisfying with the whip, I'm not gonna lie. So Q is another streamer. He's a pretty good friend of mine. He's been beating the crap out of me in Smash Brothers lately, so I need to figure out how to get my revenge. He's definitely a fun guy and a positive guy to spend some time with. So if you guys are interested in checking out his stream, I do recommend it. So coming back to like the general layout of the sewers, or as the aqueduct, as Gilbert calls it, we do find some more like the messenger statues holding lamps, lanterns, whatever you want to call them, which might show like the kind of religious significance of lanterns in general within Bloodborne. And so it does seem like the Yharnamites must have known about them to some extent and realized the importance of lanterns as well. Yeah, the video quality is looking a bit scuffed. I don't think I can really help that right now, unfortunately. But thanks for trying to let me know. Let me... Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it does look super bad. The crust is endearing. Well, thank you. Unfortunately, I was trying to like use a lot of this footage for like lore videos later on. So if it's really scuffed, that's gonna be kind of a buzzkill. So please bear with me. I appreciate all the support through these tough times with our PlayStation 4 streaming. Oh no, I shouldn't be bum rushing this guy. Okay. So this is one of the man-eater pigs. As you can kind of guess by its name, it feasts on people and corpses. And then we get to perform an unholy deed of a visceral attack on these pigs, which is pretty infamous as to like the level of violence in Bloodborne that you can uncover. So from one of the corpses in here, we get the Sawhunter Badge and just some more cold blood dew. So this badge will unlock more items for us in the Hunter's Dream from the Messenger Bath. And so let's go ahead and read it. So this badge was crafted long ago at the workshop, attests to one's prowess as a hunter of beasts. The workshop is gone, and no group recognizes this meaningless badge except the messengers in the bath, who understand its profundity. Certain things can only be entrusted with a hunter in possession of this badge, or so they believe. So, let me just try to double check that Japanese real quick. So the middle paragraph where it says like the messengers understand its profundity, I know a lot of people stumble over that. Profundity is just like another way of saying like profound or profoundness. So the messengers kind of understand like the meaning behind the badges, which is what it's trying to get across. And everything else is pretty similar. It seems like the English just has a little bit more words to it, but semantically it's very similar. So that's where we just came from. So coming into the back portion of this canal, we get like this bottomless pit. I do wonder if it was supposed to connect into Old Yharnam at some point in development, or if the developers considered putting an elevator there, because this is like right next to the Church of the Good Chalice, where we find the blood-starved beast later on. So that is the arena right there. When you look at each area, from the church, like it doesn't quite line up properly, but for the most part, they did a pretty good job of like keeping the geography similar between the areas. I love it when the large minion gets hit by the fireball. It's just funny to me. So normally there is like a bunch of like patrolling Yharnamites, but they probably got hit by the fireball right there because we took a little bit of a back route approach to this area. So yeah, that's what all these corpses are from. So just to kind of highlight that this is Old Yharnam down below, we've got a different perspective of the Church of the Good Chalice. We've got the Great Bridge over there where we fought the Cleric Beast. If we look back out over this way, we can kind of see Old Yharnam like that. Those are the stairs right there, which kind of lead down to the like little open area right before the church. And that's like the back streets where you see like the Scourge Beast and the Screaming Beasts, the Beast Patients. And this building over here where my head is like most likely supposed to be like a Jura's Tower. That's like the half collapsed one, and so like the entrance to Old Yharnam would be like around there. So they didn't put a lot of effort into like trying to make the geography line up. So I think it's kind of fun to look to see where they all fit back together. And so Pax Probliscum, welcome to the stream. I did not say that before, so I hope you enjoy your stay. Do you like a bunch of the Soulsborne games, the lore, anything like that? And Devin Guy, it's nice to see you again as always. And thanks for stopping by again. So this little shortcut opens up back to where the lamp was, where the two brick trolls were. And now that that's been opened, we can proceed to the next area. And so this ladder would be like the normal way to come up from the sewers, or the more direct route. Perhaps not normal route, but yeah, I'm really sorry about the stream quality right now. I can't really control that, unfortunately. I think I'll probably just call these Beast Boys from now. It's a pretty dumb name, but I think it gets the idea clear that they're still beasts, yet not like the full-on Scourge Beast werewolf type things. Coming into the next area, we will encounter the next boss, Father Gascoigne. This is where the little girl's music box will come into play. So, Cane Gang. Yeah, if you guys don't know, Devin Guy also like completed the game using every weapon. So like did a playthrough for each weapon of the game. So, do you really like the cane, Devin?
Beasts all over the shop. You'll be one of them, sooner or later.
So Devin asks if I have any lore about Gascoigne's name. I actually do not. It's kind of like French sounding in origin, but that's about it. I know like a lot of people like meme and say, "Oh, Father Gasoline," but so. Oh, am I gonna get it? No.
What's that smell? The sweet blood. Oh, it sings to me. It's enough to make a man sick.
Oh no. I am a little bit distracted. I do mean to be talking more, but sometimes I just like forget. Oh, that killed it? I thought it was going to be at least 2. Okay, so that was a lot smoother than I was expecting. So from him we get the Erden Tomb Key, but before I examine that, I do want to talk a bit about his dialogue. Maybe I should have died to him once while he was still human just to get his last bit of it. But sometimes I just don't like to take the time to show that stuff off. So where he says beast all over the shop, that's more of a British English idiomatic expression, which just means like there's beasts everywhere. And he says you'll be one of them sooner or later in English. The Japanese for that is like you bastard. It's the same for you too somehow, isn't it? So it's more like he doesn't believe that we're human. He thinks that we ourselves are already beasts. So that's, I think, a pretty big difference between the English and Japanese, which I think is really important to help like characterize like the people who've been inflicted by the scourge of the beast in general. When he says, "What's that smell? The sweet blood. Oh, it sings to me. It's enough to make a man sick." It's pretty similar, although instead of saying like it sings to him in Japanese, it's closer to like, "Oh, the blood is the irresistible blood is calling to me, and why don't I have a feast?" And so like the term that he uses for like feast is a bit specific. It's eizuku, which means like it's kind of like the term that some people use to say like they're feeding a dog or like an animal specifically, as opposed to like eating a meal for like or offering a meal to people or guests or friends and family and stuff like that. So the last bit of dialogue, which I did not show off, was if he kills you, he'll say, "Too proud to show your true face, eh? But a sporting hunt it was." And the Japanese is just more like, impersonating man until the end, huh? However, the hunt was irresistible. So those are some pretty big flavor differences in my opinion. I should probably try to look at the Korean for that at some point to see if it changed somewhere in development between like the English and Japanese. Because there are certain cases where like the English and Korean will match up to each other, but they don't match up with the Japanese, which like linguistically does not make sense. It would be like an almost certainty that you would need to get the same like reference material to have like the English and Korean match up. So Devin is throwing down some lore. He says, from Old French Gascoigne, or Gascony, hence a regional name. The name of the region derives from that of the Basques, who are found close by and formerly extend into this region as well. They are first named in Roman sources as Vascons, or Vascones, but the original meaning of the name derived from a root Yusk, I'm assuming, in the non-Indo-European language that they still speak today is completely obscure. By the Middle Ages, the Basques had been displaced from most of Gascony by the speakers of Gascon, a dialect of Occitan, related to French, who are proverbial for their boastfulness. So we know where the name comes from, but not what it means other than being part of the region called Gascon. Okay, thank you for that. I do enjoy like learning about stuff like that. Etymology is surprisingly relevant at times and also surprisingly irrelevant at times. So it's interesting to see any kind of definitive or like potential explanation for some of the ties that the characters' names will have in the game. So, right, I think that's all we needed to say about his dialogue. When we first see him coming into this area, we see him like butchering already defeated beast men, beast people, Yharnamites, whatever you want to call them. We can see their corpses here. There's nothing too remarkable about them. I mean, they are like splattered with blood and all that. Blood stains the ground. I already lit that. Okay. And as we go up the steps and like kind of around the area, we can see the corpse of a woman chilling on a roof. She may have been yeeted by Gascoigne's like axe attack, which we found out on like one of Lance McDonald's streams. Like I think like the Hunter's axe has like a special attack that wasn't made like ported into the retail version of the game. I don't remember like the command for it. I think it was like maybe it was like the backstep R2 or something like that. You would do like Gascoigne's eating thing where he just like does a sweeping arc from below and like really knocks the player up in the air, kind of like an uppercut. So I don't know why that wasn't included in the game. It might have been an oversight, but we did see that like in the alpha version of the game that was accessible by the player on one of Lance McDonald's streams. So going back to chat, Devin says, Miyazaki, am I right? We see the hunter in the opening cutscene vivisecting people as well. Yeah, so it is a bit curious as to whether or not like the people who are so like bloodlusty to the point where they will attack pretty much everyone on sight, whether they're afflicted by the scourge of the beast or just like they're becoming drunk with blood. It's a little bit unclear if there is a difference between the two. So from this body of a woman on the roof, we gain the aforementioned red jeweled brooch for the young girl who was in the window from earlier. So let's go ahead and examine the key as well as the brooch. So this is the key to the gate that blocks the tomb of Erden. Beyond the tomb, Erden Chapel can be found in the center of the Cathedral Ward. Only today, the church is abandoned, and some say that the residents of Erden have all gone mad. So one of the interesting points about this key is that it says like all the residents of Erden have gone mad. At first, like just at a glance, I almost thought it would have been like a little bit of a ambiguity point in the Japanese version of the text, because sometimes they don't really denote whether something is singular or plural, and the only resident we know of in like Erden Chapel is just the chapel dweller, and it's just one individual. However, the Japanese does say like all of them have gone mad, so it's like more than one, even though we don't ever really see anybody beyond the chapel dweller closely affiliated with the chapel there. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else about that. Nothing linguistically relevant beyond what I just mentioned. However, it is also interesting to note that the key points out that the Erden Chapel is in the center of the Cathedral Ward, so it seems to have been a more of like a hub area at some point in like the history of the city. And since Erden Tomb is kind of like or the chapel was kind of abandoned, it shows that there was probably a different kind of religion in Yharnam before the rise of the Healing Church, and Erden was probably like the deity of that religion, if we're kind of led to believe that they prayed to him or he was venerated to some capacity. So going to go back up and use that key, and then we're going to check out that brooch. So this is the red jeweled brooch, a woman's bright red brooch engraved with the name Viola. Perhaps the jewel is a gift from a hunter, used to change into a droplet blood gem that fortifies any weapon. With a proper workshop tool, various weapons can be fortified. And so this points out that the name for Viola is relevant when we compare it to that music box that I was using. it says two names can be made out, however faintly, Viola and Gascoigne. So that is the little daughter's mummy who is looking for her father, and this happened to be Father Gascoigne, and it's very likely that he's the one who ended up killing or murdering Viola. Some people like to believe that it's the kind of Yharnamites that we can find down there in the area beforehand. I don't necessarily think that like really fits in with like a lot of the themes of FromSoft games. They really like to dial up the kind of tragedies that we can find, and so the daughter sends us on a fruitless quest and a bit of a heart-wrenching quest. So coming into the next area, we enter like the back portion of the chapel, and we get into like a kind of private library. Commodore Lemons, welcome to the stream. Gascoigne is a French guy confirmed. Unfortunately not. It just seems like it's a bit more of a coincidence as to whether or not the names are related to Earth, but there isn't any like official way to connect them. Like a lot of the place names, like the Molotov mentioned in Molotov cocktails, or the Hippocratic Oath, those things are just a little bit of a coincidence and more of a product of translation rather than what we can find in the Japanese version of the game. So this is the Blood Gem Workshop tool, and so this is one of the Lost Hunter tools that Gehrman was talking about, and we can use it to put blood gems in our weapons. And then we get a lore note on an actual note, like not held up by messengers, in this little private library, and it tells us that the Bergenworth spider hides all manner of rituals and keeps our lost master from us. A terrible shame. It makes my head shudder uncontrollably. So this is a reference to Rom, the vacuous spider, who we'll find once we actually go to Bergenworth. And it tells us that it is hiding all manner of rituals. And what it means by that, this idea of hiding something is more akin to like concealing something. So it's not as though the rituals are being blocked, it's that they're being hidden from view, they're being obscured by Rom. As to who this lost master is, we're not fully sure. It could be a reference to Mikolash, who's kind of like astral body is in the Nightmare of Mensis. Although I have my doubts about that, because you can find his physical body in Yahar'gul, so I don't necessarily think that he's lost. It could be a reference to the moon presence, because Rom is kind of concealing the red moon from Yharnam. It may also be a reference to Master Willem, and in earlier like cut and drafts of the game, like Willem had a bit more of an active role, and he was referred to as like a master a few times, and I think like the that gets a bit more supported with some of the cut dialogue from the Forbidden Woods password gatekeeper. So, alright, that's that note. And before I forget, like in this little library, we've got these kind of Astrolabes or Astrolabe and auxiliary spheres, which kind of show like the positions of the celestial bodies in the heavens or the universe. Like the middle is supposed to be the sun, and it might have a depiction of like the Earth or their Earth equivalent, and kind of like Lagrangian points around it. I haven't found like a ton of like lore rationales to explain why that's an important thing, but one thing that I would try to show off, although it might be hard without the monocular, is like the sun in the very middle of the auxiliary spheres has a face on it, and okay, you can kind of see it, and it's upside down. And so in some of the earlier builds of the game, like Bergenworth or part of the lecture hall might have been upside down, and we can find like a right side up version of this hanging from the ceiling in Bergenworth. So that might have been where like some of that connection was initially supposed to come from, but ultimately it's not terribly important. It's just kind of like an Easter egg that I like to show off. So even though it's not too relevant now, it's just kind of fun to look at. So this is the Blood Gem Workshop tool. It kind of looks like a trepanation device, like you bore into the skull to like let out blood. So this says it's a misplaced workshop tool from the Hunter's Dream. The hunter who retrieves this can fortify weapons by kneading blood gems into them. Blood gems add properties to weapons when used to fortify them, as blood defines an organism. So that final line about blood defining an organism is really interesting. Um, Even in Japanese, it says something pretty similar to that, and it really doesn't like make a ton of sense on its own. So um, even in the context of the game and knowing like a lot about the lore, that line is still a bit of a mystery, like how it all like ties together. All right, so the Japanese for that is pretty similar as well. All right, so that concludes everything for like this kind of library. It's got papers and books strewn about all over the floor, so someone may have been doing some research in here at some point and left it in a mess. You don't really know, but coming in this next area, we've got an ornate door that leads into the chapel itself. So we've entered the Cathedral Ward. This is Erden Chapel. It is in the center of Cathedral Ward, as I mentioned before. There's an NPC over here, and we can go ahead and talk to him now to gain a little bit of insight as to what this place is.
Hmm? Oh, you must be a hunter. Very sorry. The incense must have masked your scent. Good, good. I've been waiting for one of your ilk. These hunts have everyone all locked up inside, waiting for it to end. It always does, always has, you know, since forever. But it won't end nicely, not this time. Even some folks hiding inside are going bad. The screams of women folk, the stench of blood, the snarls of beasts, none of them's too uncommon now. Yharnam's done for, I tell ya. But if you spot anyone with their wits about 'em, tell 'em about this here Erden Chapel. They'll be safe here. The incense wards off the beasts. Spread the word. Tell 'em to come on over, if you wouldn't mind.
So this is the Erden Chapel dweller. Despite his kind of like sinister looking appearance, he's one of the very few like truly altruistic NPCs in all of like the Soulsborne catalog. He does really want to save people from like being attacked by beasts and things like that. For his dialogue, there is a little bit of an interesting like linguistic point I want to touch upon, where he says, even some folks hiding inside are going bad. The Japanese for that is more like, the truth is the victims have started appearing even amongst those who've shut themselves away, and at a surface level, like that is certainly like very similar. The only reason why I bring that up is because the word that he uses for like victims could also be interpreted in a way that's more like a sacrifice to like gods or something like that, like a living sacrifice. So whether or not it's like intentional that he means like they're sacrifices, or whether they're just actually literal victims is a bit up in the air. I think there's probably a little bit of truth to both of those interpretations. So just wanted to bring that up.
I know I shouldn't be asking you, but if you happen upon someone while hunting, tell them about this here Erden Chapel, if they seem worth being told, that is. Oh, and I do sincerely hope they are.
And so he tells us that like this place is Erden Chapel. That's kind of where we get how to pronounce it, because otherwise it's just kind of a mess trying to figure it out on our own. And he reveals like this is the very first safe place that we can send people to, and we can send like that old lady that we talked to earlier here.
I know I shouldn't be. If you happen upon, if they see. Oh,
so that's pretty much it for that. I will go ahead and go into trying trying to think of what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and just proceed really quickly into the next area to grab the monocular, and then kind of go back and deal with the NPCs back in the Cathedral Ward, or Central Yharnam. Hopefully I don't die and like lose all my echoes right quick. So these guys have a little bit more health. Oh, I forgot I could upgrade my weapon. Although I guess I haven't been to the dream to do it. That guy's surrounded by a bunch of crows, so I like to kite him away. Lemon says, the Chapel Dweller sounds like Dick Van Dyke. You know, I haven't really seen like a whole lot of Dick Van Dyke. There's something that was on a lot when I was a kid. It just bored the hell out of me, so I always turned the TV off. Or not like the TV off, I always like switch the channel instead. So here we get probably like one of the most important items for like a lore playthrough. We get the monocular. And with it, we can obviously look farther away. It's kind of like a telescope. So just to show this off, we get some zoom. And so I'm gonna head back to the Hunter's Dream and then come back through this area a little bit later. You say his accent sounds like it? I honestly don't remember what Dick Van Dyke sounded like. So I did want to mention a few things about Gascoigne that I kind of forgot about since the fight was so short. When we are introduced to him, we see him like turn towards the camera and we see bandages covering his eyes. That shows that he's been inflicted by the Scourge of the Beast, or afflicted by it rather. And he kind of has like a snarling expression, and it almost looks as though like his canines are larger than they need to be. I don't think I have any blood gems, but maybe I do. Okay, no. And so maybe I should have talked to Gehrman after the Cleric Beast. I don't fully remember if he says anything different then, but his dialogue will be different now.
The moon is close. It will be a long hunt tonight. If the beasts loom large and threaten to crush your spirits, seek a holy chalice, as every hunter before you has. A holy chalice will reveal the tomb of the gods, where hunters partake in communion.
So there's a lot to unpack with that specific set of dialogue right there. Gehrman mentions that the moon is close tonight, and so it'll be a long hunt. And that just kind of could show that like there is a little bit of a time distortion or something along those lines for the hunter, and that like the proximity of the moon presence or like the moon being close to Yharnam will elongate the night of the hunt. I mean, obviously in real life that's not going to happen. If the moon is closer to the earth, like the day isn't delayed at all or prolonged or anything like that. So it's just kind of one of those cosmic horror tropes that we just have to go along with, especially since the nature of time in Bloodborne is a little bit malleable, not in the sense of like Dark Souls or the timeline is intentionally convoluted, but just like the hunter can relive parts of the night over and over and over. As far as like the lore reason for that is concerned, it's a little bit messy to kind of describe. The way that I like to think about it personally would be like there's, as far as like the people in the waking world are concerned, it's probably like one continuous night of the hunt, and it might be something like Groundhog Day, where like the hunter just goes and does everything over and over and over until like they get it right finally. Of course, it's a little bit not as clean as like Groundhog Day because we don't like start from the very beginning of the game each time we go through, but that's just kind of what makes sense to me as far as like the time dilation goes. Oh yes, and the final part of Gehrman's dialogue where he talks about a holy chalice will reveal the tomb of the gods where hunters partake in communion. His set of dialogue right there shares a common set of text from the Thumero chalice description, and that that kind of a same dialogue set or same text is only really shown off in the Japanese version of the game. In English, they use two different two different kinds of translations for it. Part of the reason for that may have been they might not have noticed that it's repeated text, and so Gehrman saying things out loud it just wouldn't flow very naturally if it used like the more scholarly type language used in the actual chalice description. So like our written word is a bit different from how we speak naturally, and so that might have been why they came up with that difference. But now that I've kind of talked about it, I'll go into the content of that. The Japanese, a bit more literally, is closer to something along the lines of a holy chalice exposes the graves of gods. Its blood becomes the sustenance of hunters. Receive communion. And so this idea of communion is the kind of same term that the Japanese will use to describe the Eucharist, which is like the body and the blood of Christ. It's what Catholics take communion from. So like eating like the wafer and drinking the wine is supposed to represent like the literal body and the literal blood of Christ that they are consuming to become like part of their like religious sacrament. The one thing that I would really like to highlight as far as like the blood becoming the sustenance of the hunters, in my opinion, it should be understood that it should be like the blood of the chalices is what sustain hunters, and so that which you use in the chalices to open the tombs of the gods in the game itself is ritual blood. So the way that I interpret it would be like ritual blood is what essentially is what Gehrman is talking about. So ritual blood and things related to it, most likely cold blood and blood vials, are probably all similar kinds of things, and it'll be a little bit easier to talk about like once we get those items, and we'll revisit those once we go through Old Yharnam as well. And so, speaking of Old Yharnam, Gehrman tells us to go into Old Yharnam to kind of get those chalices to explore the dungeons, so that way it's to me I take it as a bit more of like a developer hint of where to go, because in order to proceed with the story you need to either go through Old Yharnam or through the main gate of the Cathedral Ward, which is locked and requires like the Hunter Chief emblem to open, which costs 10,000 echoes, which is a little bit much for this early on in the game. So that's it for now, and we'll continue with this dialogue.
Most of the holy chalices lie deep within the tomb of the gods, and the few that found their way to the surface were lost again in the hands of men. But if the old hunter tales remain true, one of the holy chalices is worshipped in the valley hamlet. Yet the town is in disarray. It was burned and abandoned for fear of the scourge. Home now only to beasts. The perfect place for a hunter, wouldn't you say?
And so the Japanese for that is very similar to what the English has. They did a really good job with that. And continuing on with this dialogue.
One of the holy chalices is worshipped in the valley hamlet, a town of beasts. The perfect place for a
Right, so that's pretty much everything that Gehrman has to say. Devin says, the Tomb of the Gods, you love that description for the Chalice Dungeons. I do too. It's pretty interesting. And it is sometimes like in these games, like the idea of gods can be a little bit muted or like not strongly like reinforced in the Japanese, but it definitely uses like kami, which I suppose technically isn't necessarily god, but it's more like something divine. It could be a spirit, not necessarily a god, but yeah, they use that kind of terminology pretty explicitly for like the Tomb of the Gods, the Tomb of the Kami. So it's a pretty interesting stuff. So yeah, we just got another bot in the chat, and all right, so time to level
home. What is it you'd... Very well. Let the echoes become your strength. Let me stand close.
So if you listen closely, there's like this kind of chiming noise that the doll has while she's channeling echoes into us. She seems to be taking them from our right hand, or channeling into our right hand. It's a little bit unclear how that works out exactly. What should I level up for now? May as well do some endurance now because we're still early on in the game. And then we'll go ahead and talk to her.
Over time, countless hunters have visited this stream. The graves here stand in their memory. It all seems so long ago now.
So the doll's dialogue there, she'll say that like during like a new game plus by a new type of grave, which should like represent the players. But since we are starting a new playthrough, like she'll just say it like in this position as well. And Devin says it looks similar to when the player uses Cold Blood, if not the same effect entirely. I'll show that off just to kind of compare. I'm glad you brought that up.
Over time,
okay, so that's pretty much it for now.
Farewell, good hunter. May.
So let's check that out. I'm just gonna use like the weakest one for now. I think it is a bit different. The effect is probably more similar like to the last part of it, but it's fun to look at stuff like that. So Lemon says the Beast Scourge slithers up through the right leg, and I guess so does the source of our strength, the right side. That's potential. Like some of this stuff is a bit superstitious on the part of the characters in the game, but since we do like stab blood vials into our right leg, it is somewhat supported as an idea in general. I'm not sure what I should buy. Got a decent supply of the blood vials and stuff for now. Oh yeah, we did get the Sawhunter Badge, which does open up the option to buy like the starting gift messenger items. So we get the cleaver, the axe, and the cane, as well as the spear. Although the spear might be just from looting the item. I don't fully remember how that lines up. And then we get the pistol and the blunderbuss as well. The throwing knives I think are new, as well as the pebbles and the bold hunter's mark. I should probably like open up Meph's wiki just to get like a little bit of a clearer image on that, but it'll be okay. It's not terribly important as far as like the lore goes. Buy the hat for the style hood is unsightly. Right now I'm just using like the foreign garb for like this pretty much this entire playthrough, just for consistency. Is like a kind of default appearance for the player, because I am trying to gather like footage for YouTube like video style essays, which apparently with like some of the video quality I might need to redo anyway, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I'll do with what we have. We're not the most pro streamer in my career so far. Maybe I'll probably get better as we go along. And so after beating Father Gascoigne, the world state changes. the sky becomes a lot more tinged with red, and we get into like a deeper evening portion of the game. So it's really pretty lighting, and there's not a ton of reason to come back into Central Yharnam after the fact, so it's pretty easy to miss or not appreciate.
You needn't concern yourself with me. I'm afraid I'm of little help now. But before I did this, I made no use of it, but perhaps you. What afflicted me was incurable, but this town gave me hope. Their strange blood bought me time. I was most fortunate, unharmed by the plague of beasts. I can even die human.
So I like a lot of what Gilbert has going on with this dialogue. He's got that symptomatic coughing of a dead man or soon-to-be dead man, although he thinks he can die as a human. That does get a bit called into question later on when we revisit this area after the red moon is revealed, because we will find a beast patient who has burst out of this building of most likely Gilbert, all things considered, especially if you truly believe that FromSoft likes to stab the hearts of the players with the most brutal means that they can. And so Lemon says Rip Gilberto, Devin says Vape Nation, Vape Nation, lightening up some Yharnam purple with his stolen flame sprayer. Nice.
Don't you worry about me.
So some people do wonder whether or not like Gilbert was a hunter himself, since he has the flame sprayer, and the flame sprayer says like it's related to some hunters. We'll look at that in just a moment as well. So let's go ahead and examine that now. This is a left-hand weapon. So it is a special weapon used by certain members of the Healing Church. Spits searing flames by using blood-imbued quicksilver bullets as a special medium. Not the most efficient weapon by any stretch, but sometimes a sea of flame is just what the doctor ordered. Besides, the beasts of Yharnam can always use a good cleansing. Let me check the Japanese on that. I think there's just like a small difference, like with just what the doctor ordered. So yeah, it's just like the just what the doctor ordered is just a little bit of a localization flavor text right there, and not in the Japanese. I don't mind like that so much because it's not super significant. It ties the idea of like doctors and like the Healing Church together. I think is a really good like addition to the flavor of this item. He sounds Welsh or Cornish, kind of like a pirate. Do you know your accents really well? I wish I was a little bit better at like identifying them myself. Which way should we go for the little girl? Probably the other way. But let's go ahead and farm up some stuff. Before then. Born in Cornwall, raised in England. It seems like with the pistol, like it's harder to get that first like hit to like parry. Although that might just be like in my head. I'm not 100% sure. So Devin, you said like the cane is in your top 3. What are your like top 2 if you had to choose? Yeah, we're gonna go this way first, I think. got a bit lucky with that second swing, catching the dog in the blind spot. Which is why, part of the reason why I do like the cane. Like, it's got a really good, like, kind of protective arc around it, and it's really fast. I know, like, the saw cleaver has a really good transform and stuff like that. It just doesn't suit me very much. And the axe is just, like, a bit too slow, and I don't like its normals. Although, like, its charged R2 is just ridiculous if you use it well. So you say the saw spear, the whirligig, and the cane. You'd love the church pick, but that L2 really makes it fall short. I haven't used, like, a lot of the DLC weapons. I should give them more of a chance, but, like, for, like, the lore throughs and stuff like that, it's just a bit easier to just go with the bread and butter so I don't embarrass myself too severely. I mean, sure, it already happens, but just, at least in terms of, like, trying to cut down on some of the time that I spend crashing on certain areas. So your first playthrough, you axe charge R2 the entire game. Yeah, I can believe that. Beast Cutter is cool, like a fat cane. Yeah, definitely. So, okay. Now we come back to that old lady who just tore us a new one from talking to her and being useless before, but now we know of a safe location. I suppose I could have talked to the fake Yosefka first to kind of like open up the path to an altering location, but it's not too big a deal. We explored that in our last playthrough, and we will talk to her shortly.
So what is it now? Are much better ways to pass the time. Unless you found me a nice safe place.
Indeed we have.
Well, what do you know? An outsider worth a lick of salt. Well, don't just stand there. Don't you have work to do? Go slit some throats. Get this mess done with. Oh, enough with you. Trot along. Chop, chop.
Trot along, chop, chop. Gotta love it.
Oh, enough with you. Trot along.
So that pretty much concludes what we can do with the old lady for now. She still busts our chops for like saving her life, essentially, or at least stopping her from going mad. Asterisk. Terms and conditions apply. Eileen is still in this area. She will change locations once we unlock the gates to Cathedral Ward.
What are you still doing? Enough a hunter must...
And she says the same thing. So we're just gonna run quickly through the aqueduct and go up the ladder to the little girl, maybe? Yeah, screw it. Whatever. And then once we talk to the little girl, we'll just go ahead back into the clinic and talk to the imposter doctor for the first time this game. Sundry Saturn, welcome back to the stream. Nice to see you again. And let me catch back up on the chat. It says Commodore Lemons believes that the cane is Castlevania as fuck. I don't disagree, especially with the whip form of it. It really lends into this genre of game very, very well, and I really like it as a weapon and just thematically as well, especially with the flavor text. Devin says the cane is good because it's so versatile. It's only considerably less damage until you're like blood level 45-ish, and then the damage catches up from scaling and stuff. Yeah, unfortunately, like a lot of the damage really is kind of dependent on upgrading the weapon, and at least with the cane, like you get it very early on, and you're pretty well able to like upgrade it consistently. But if you don't know about that, or just like how much like the scaling really goes along with the weapon upgrades, it can be really tough. So like if you're kind of like sequence breaking a little bit, or like going and like killing things in lower levels, it's definitely a harder weapon to use because it's harder to like break limbs and things like that and really maximize your damage potential. So Lemons loves the running R2 and the backstep attacks. Yeah. Right, so we use that red brooch, and the reason why is by using it, the little girl will be able to move to a safer location, sort of, and otherwise, like her quest will just stop immediately, I believe, if you give her the brooch. So this is a blood gem that fortifies weapons and adds various properties. Drop-up blood gems are special gems that adapt to various weapons and shapes. Created from a bright red brooch, this blood gem strengthens the effect of rallying. A quintessential hunter skill, rallying symbolizes the battle-worn hunter, who is often the only thing standing after a bloodbath. Let me just double-check the Japanese on that. I don't remember if there's a difference or not. Okay, so semantically it's very similar. The English is just a little bit wordier to make it a little bit flashier, which is perfectly fine. The overall just is conveyed properly.
Hello, Miss Hunter. Still can't find my mum.
And so I do like that there is that like gender dialogue, which is Miss Hunter in English. I think in Japanese it's probably just like Hunter One-san, which is like big sister, but it's a lot more like distanced in Japanese. So.
Oh, okay. I can wait. But isn't there something I can do? Maybe Mum and Dad are stuck out there, waiting for me to come and find them. What do you think, Miss Hunter?
So we can tell the child to either go to the clinic once we talk to the imposter doctor, or do nothing, or tell her to go to the chapel. The last time we sent her to the clinic, and we gained like the formless Erden rune from killing her. So this time we're going to attempt to send her to the chapel, and see what that will do for her quest line.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Miss Hunter. I love you almost as much as Mum and Dad. And Granddad.
And as Lemon points out, everyone is big brother, big sister in Asia, or niece and nephew. That is a very accurate statement. It's a very more like communal type of society in general in those eastern countries, and so like it definitely comes across as a little bit weird and creepy in English. So I'm perfectly fine with them saying like Miss Hunter instead, because it sounds like very like a warm and like a little bit familiar, even though like there is still like that kind of like distance. Like the child doesn't really know our identity, so she can only call us like a hunter.
Thank you, Miss Hunter. I love you almost as much as Mum and Dad. And Granddad.
And so Mum and Dad are Viola and Gascoigne, whom we've already met, and Granddad is most likely Henrik, the partner of Gascoigne, and potential either like father or stepfather for Gascoigne as well. But that will kind of wrap up the rest of that little girl's quest for now. I don't really feel like going through the plaza and dealing with all that since we've already cleared everything out over here. So I'm just going to take this route back to the clinic. Let's go this way. No, that's the bridge. Any thoughts on the Granddad line? You know, some people assume it's Henrik, but I think his face data is way darker than anyone in the Gascoigne family. I'm not like too concerned about like the face data. It could be biological in nature, or it could just be like what do you want to call it? Like a term of endearment rather than like actual like lineage. So whatever like a person wants their headcanon to be for that is perfectly fine with me, really. Although I can see arguments going either way. I don't really think it changes too much for the overall story, so I don't worry about it too much myself. He's staying from so much living. It's a pretty good point, as we're probably not going to find out later in this playthrough. I'm probably going to want to fight Eileen instead of Henrik. Or, well, instead of the Bloody Crow, so I'll let her deal with Henrik on her own. So now we do have the imposter Yosefka in the background. She does not track us with her head, I don't think, or maybe I might have it the other way around. I tend to forget. But if we try to look through like the little crack in the door, we can see that, if I can show it off properly, she's carrying like a cane in her hand. So this is, even though they do share the same model, this is the imposter. FromSoft really reuses their assets while they can. If we like look at Vicar Amelia's face and like the cutscene and like break the boundaries to reveal it, it's the exact same as like a Bell Maiden. So it's a little bit hard to make out what they wanted to do with that. Lance did reveal like in earlier builds of the game, like the windows here were opaque and you couldn't see through them. So it does seem like there probably was some intention to make it look like, oh, maybe they are sisters, or something along those lines. But it's really a mystery how like the fake imposter doctor relates to the true Yosefka. And so Lemon says, you think culturally in Japan, whether he's related or not, Viola would call him granddad, uncle, son. You mean the daughter. Yeah, I agree with you.
Oh, well, hello. Splendid. Let me ask you a small kindness. You're soon off to hunt, I presume? Then, if you find any survivors, tell them to seek Yosefka's clinic. Upon my Hippocratic oath, if they are yet human, I will look after them. Perhaps even cure them. This sickness, these beasts, they are not to be feared. This time the night is long. I may be trapped here, but I should do something to help. I'll even offer a reward for your cooperation. Tempted? Well, off you go then.
So, if the player did talk to the real Yosefka beforehand, this should be a bit of a hint that something is not quite as it seems, because the true Yosefka does reveal to us that like her name is Yosefka, whereas this version of her doesn't seem to be familiar with us at all. She asks if we're going out on a hunt, but since we already talked to the previous Yosefka, it should have been very clear that we've already been out hunting to some degree. She, instead of saying like upon her Hippocratic oath in Japanese, it's just more like, oh, as a doctor, I will treat the patient. So that's a little bit of a distancing from like a real world like parallel to like Hippocrates, like an ancient Greek philosopher and doctor. And so she also mentions that the night is long, so it does seem as though like the denizens of Yharnam do have some concept of like differing lengths to the night of the hunt or something like that, but it's still unclear how much like the average Joe on the street really knows, and that might tie into like why some of the Yharnamites will say like death to the ministers and things like that. Some of their cut dialogues is more like kill the priest, kill the priest. So there might have been a bit of a dispute from like the commoner and like the upper class healing church officials, but that might have been a bit pulled back, and it's a little bit unclear whether or not like death to the ministers really supposed to have been included in the final game or if it's a bug. I think we just kind of have to take it as it is and just maybe there is a bit of a distrust within the common Yharnamite and the healing church.
If you find anyone who's still human, send them straight to Yosefka's clinic. You can assure them there's no place safer. Please, do me this service.
And so she says send them to Yosefka's clinic, like not my clinic or anything like that. So there is like a little bit of a mental distancing between the idea of the clinic and this imposter doctor. So if you're really like sharp, you might be able to pick up on that. Unfortunately, on my first playthrough, I don't even really think I talked to this doctor, so I might have like missed her completely. Although, well, to be fair, I did come in like after the blood moon, and because I wanted to find like the final boss, and I kind of like skimmed my way into that information. But other than that, I played pretty blindly. So I think that's all I had to say about her dialogue. She does say that she can cure them from the beasts of their beasthood, but we will find out later. Perhaps like the cure is worse than the disease.
If you find anyone, you can assure them. Please, do me this.
Right, so that's pretty much all she has to say. And I'm gonna go ahead and use the bold hunter's mark, and then try to complete like the little girl's quest that we talked about earlier. For some reason, L2 spam doesn't work. Who'd have guessed? Levin says, you always liked the shotgun with the cane just for the stagger potential. That's normally what I do. The last time I used the blunderbuss, and so this time I just went with the pistol. There isn't like a ton of a difference between them, but this is a little bit of a longer, maybe not like literally longer, but a little bit of a more time consuming route to the little girl, but I don't know. Sometimes the longer route is just perhaps more of a scenic route instead. Since I've killed Gascoigne, I may as well use some of those Molotovs. Tend to forget about those as an option. So this will bring us back down to like the patrolling Yharnamites. I do like the dashing R1 of the cane. And so this brings us back to the little girl's house. Although she's no longer there. So going back down the sewer and heading towards Erden Chapel, we will eventually find out the fate of that little girl. And so part of the reason why you like the blunderbuss is in case you suck at parrying, which you do. I don't know, like parrying just takes like a little bit of experience and like kind of knowing the enemy's AI loops. It still can be hard at times, like I'm really bad at like parrying like the butcher type enemies. So coming to this man-eater pig, it may certainly live up to its name, because from its remains we gain some blood vials, and more importantly, a red messenger ribbon. So the red messenger ribbon is a red ribbon that messengers are oddly fond of. The thick, pungent red was drawn from the organs of some unfortunate victim. A strange choice indeed, but perhaps for the messengers wearing this accessory constitutes a form of mourning. As you may imagine, since we killed this pig before and it did not drop the ribbon, it is extremely, extremely likely that it belonged to that little girl whom we tried to send to Erden Chapel. She met her untimely demise at the mouth of this monstrous pig, and the messengers have taken a ribbon and will wear it for their own. So it's a little bit of a macabre spectacle, but certainly befitting of like the whole Gascoigne family questline, essentially. I don't think there is too much different in the Japanese for that. Let me look real quick. Oh yeah, it just says like the rich pungent blood is the color of the blood of entrails, and it isn't difficult to imagine what happened to its previous owner. And I suppose the last little bit is somewhat different. It says, "It's bizarre the way they're fond of it, but perhaps could the messenger's outfit be a kind of memorial service?" And it poses the question. So like the perspective of the messengers is a little bit left as something that we can just imagine for ourselves. I do like that kind of the flavor the Japanese gives it. And so I think personally like it should be explicit that it belonged to the little girl. I know like a lot of people really like to kind of avoid those what do you want to call it, the sad endings for some of the characters in the game. I love it when it happens. I think these guys drop shards occasionally. Oh, that hit me. So this is back to Erden Chapel, or the tomb rather, and one thing that I do like to show off in this area is what we can find at the base of the tomb itself. We've got a depiction of a man kind of like kneeling with his dogs to a deer or a stag in the middle of like this kind of foresty scene. This is this kind of relief sculpture is taken from a real life inspiration of the Hunt of Saint Hubert, which is the Catholic patron saint of hunting. It is also known as like the Jägermeister deer. You can see it over here as well, although this version is a lot more bloodstained. The part of the reason why I bring this up is because Saint Hubert like happened upon the deer in the forest, and he was shown a divine like message of like how to hunt properly or like revere God in the way that he's hunting, and to like reform his kind of lifestyle. And so that inspired him to become a more pious man. It is said that Saint Hubert or Herbert, I don't know exactly which is which, I think sometimes the names are a bit interchangeable, had a stole or like a scarf that was said to cure rabies, or in French I think the story comes from, and rabies is synonymous with like frenzy, I suppose. And if we consider that like Gascoigne is characterized by the heavy shawl on his outfit, I think that kind of imagery is most certainly tied to like Gascoigne representing the healing church, and the healing church being powerless against rabies, which is a kind of disease which is very strongly associated with dogs and canines and going mad and attacking indiscriminately. I think that there's a lot of good symbolism between what we find on this little relief sculpture and Father Gascoigne is a hunter who's gone drunk with blood. Oh, and I suppose I didn't talk about the general layout of the Tomb of Erdin beforehand. It's not terribly important in my opinion. We get a bunch of graves haphazardly stacked upon each other. They're a little bit different in their design from some of the other graves that we've seen so far. We get the quintessential Yharnamite like skeleton statue lantern that's repeated in the Chalice dungeons, and then we get this gigantic statue of what may have been Yharnam's depiction of Erdin, even though he's described as formless in his runes and things like that. So that's pretty much it for this area. And then we're gonna finally proceed through Cathedral Ward and probably Old Yharnam next, since I don't have like 10,000 echoes to just go ahead and advance the game. And since we did reload the area, the old woman should be in the chapel now as well. So if we do look closely at the chapel dweller's eyes, they're completely white. His retinas are completely clouded over. His skin is a very like dark gray ashen color. His hands are gigantic. His limbs seem to be maybe not entirely like elongated, because like legs are like crunched underneath them, although like some of the cut chalice enemies show that they do have really long like kind of stilt-like legs with compared to like their very small like hunchbacked body. He's either a Thumerian or he's got that scurvy, says Lemon. Yeah, I don't necessarily think there's too much of a difference between like the Thumerians and the Yharnamites. I think like the Thumerians have probably just been like maybe not bred is the right word, but like they've become accustomed to like the cold blood, and that probably has like altered their biology to some degree. I think like if you had normal humans over a period of generations like using the cold blood, they would probably end up resembling the Thumerians as well.
Ah, the hunter. Thank you. So that old girl, you told her about this place, right? Well, she don't offer me much in the way of conversation, but still, I'd rather see her alive anyhow.
So we get a gesture from him as well.
If you find any sane survivors, well, send them along to Erdin Chapel, will ya?
As far as the dweller's dialogue goes in Japanese, he uses very like humble language towards the hunter to show like a kind of reverence and a difference in their like societal standing between them, which I probably should have pointed out earlier. He'll also refer to the other characters in the game humbly as well, just kind of reinforces that he really looks down upon himself compared to the other characters. I think that's it that he has to say for now.
If you find any, send them along.
Yep. And this is the old lady that we rescued from that kind of residence that had the dog from earlier. If we look really closely at her face, we can see it's like kind of a... Well, she keeps looking at us, it'll be a bit hard to show off. It's a little bit disfigured. Perhaps not because of the blood or anything, but it's just like I don't know what else I can really say about it. Like if you look at the face sliders on like Meph's wiki, it's a lot more apparent than what we can see directly from the game. And this kind of like feature of like a somewhat like disheveled face is kind of shared in common with some of the Yharnamites. Like the suspicious man has a similar kind of appearance as well.
Oh no, I haven't forgotten. Do you think I owe you something? Well, that's a fine lark, I'd say. This whole mess that Yharnam's in is all your fault. Our blood's ruined, tainted by your ilk. Don't you come near me. I know your type. You. Stay away from me. I know all your tricks. You.
So that's pretty much all she has to say. It really reinforces that, like, potentially one of the reasons why the Yharnamites are distrusting of outsiders is that they've been led to believe that the foreigners have, like, tainted the blood, and that might be why, like, the scourge or the scourge of beasts is a thing, and why people have been transforming. Of course, like, since we're like outside actors in this kind of location, it just seems a bit preposterous to believe such claims, but I always forget that you can't just stun like these guys. So before I forget, I should show off like the interior of the chapel and things like that. So we do get some like statues of possibly Erden, the same statues that we saw in the tomb of Erden, but they've got like these forked beards, and they're like kind of having a reverential like pose towards the sky. So it's something that's not just unique to Erden Chapel, unfortunately. I wish I could say like for a fact this is supposed to represent Erden, but it's just used so ubiquitously, like it's a little bit hard to really like choose to die on that hill and defend that claim. Alright, so coming into this next area, we get a little bit of our first taste of the kind of madness that one can experience within Yharnam. So we just get grabbed by this cosmic vortex, which dealt a ton of damage to us, and it did increase our insight by like 1 point. It might have been hard to see, but there is like a very, very faint outline of the amygdala hand which grabs us, and so that's a kind of great one, or like one of the cosmic horrors of Bloodborne that will get revealed to us later on. And so we did get like a new item set from like that corpse, and we'll go ahead and examine that now. So we got the top hat, as well as like the other portion of the hunter set, I believe. So the top hat, I think, is the only real difference. So this is a hat worn by hunters who admire formality. Some hunters place an emphasis on form, as seen by the use of the threaded cane. For them, formality, beauty, and justice are the very essence of our humanity, and precisely what keeps hunters from becoming something else. I really like the description because it shows like a lot of flavor as to like the certain kinds of hunters' beliefs that there are within Yharnam. I believe like the top hat is probably something like more similar to the ideals represented with like the people of the clan of Canehurst, where they would use like a more quote-unquote refined techniques to dispatch beasts with and stuff like that. Yeah, so the Japanese for that is also very, very similar. And I don't think there's really anything too much else to say about that. But we do know that like the idea of like beauty of form and stuff like that don't necessarily separate hunters from beasts. However, it might be beneficial to like use more long-ranged weapons and not become like closely in close contact with the blood or become exposed to it, since it can cause one to become blood drunk if exposed to too much of it. Lemon says the top hat is overpowered. It does have pretty good blunt resistance if I remember correctly, which is kind of interesting. I guess all the space in it helps out. So yeah, like the black, the foreign attires, like defenses are utter trash, and like for a normal run of the game, you definitely don't want to be using it, especially this late. Coming out into this little courtyard, we got like another well, which is spattered with blood. Although I think I did that actually with the little church servants, which I should have talked about when I fought them. But when we come out into this like little graveyard, we see like a child-sized coffin that's still wrapped up. We've got barrels filled with ashes of probably cremated remains of bones, and all of that kind of good stuff that's just endemic to Yharnam in general. So if we try to examine these church servants, we see that they've got bells on their around their necks. On the supplemental material on like the PlayStation website reveals like the church servants and the church giants would wear these bells to warn the residents that these things are already out on the hunt, and they will pretty much attack it indiscriminately, and so they better get inside before like they become hunted as well. Which really does call into question like how the healing church controlled these things. If we look at their face, they're completely pale. Their eyes are really hard to make out. They're almost completely pitch black. Like there's a very, very faint, like kind of gray color to the center of them where their irises would be. So it's a little bit unclear if they're dead, if they're alive, if they're Thumerians, or all that kind of thing. And how on earth the church would try to control them. So this is the giant version of those enemies. They have the draping holy shawl on their backs. They carry gigantic axes, and we can hear them stomping about as they go around. They do kind of have a bowler hat and a fedora, so they wanted to be fashionable as well, I suppose. Some of the ones that we can find like underground or naked. So it's a bit unclear whether or not these are like taken from underground. Oh no. They do no damage. Oh, I forgot. No, I did upgrade. I just forgot. No, I haven't gone back to the game to put on like the blood gem and stuff. Where's their bone? I know if you attack with one of their legs, you can cause them to bend down for a visceral. I think it's harder to pull off with the cane in general, or maybe just the style that I use to attack these guys. Oof. Imagine that a giant has a ridiculous range. And this gate leads into the Cathedral Ward proper, and it has that kind of communion rune, which I talked about on last stream, etched onto the surface of the gate, like, and the hunter chief emblem shares that rune on it. And if you were to hold it up to the gate and open it, messengers are on the other side where this kind of lever is. It's hard to make out. And they will pull it and open it from the other side. So there is like a little bit of a kind of a like the wizard behind the proverbial curtain here, where you can kind of see the mechanics of like how it does inexplicably open if you do have the required insight for it, which is 50. I'm not going to worry about that so much this playthrough because I did show that off last time. So I'll probably just buy a bit more items with insight or whatever. Or not really concern myself with going through the side areas before defeating Ram. So we get some more bloodstone shards, and throughout this area we see like baby caskets, as well as like these gigantic urns filled with incense, which may be why there aren't like a whole bunch of beasts in the Cathedral Ward like all around me right now. We do see like a bunch of like haze and smoke that could have been due to incense being burned to ward away beasts, and we will discover like the incense is made out of the bones of people as well. So whatever is in bone does ward away like beasts. Not entirely sure how that's so different from like what's in the blood, especially when you look at enemies like Dark Beast Parl, which is only consists of bones, but what are we gonna do about that, really? Thought so. I thought he killed me. I'm stuck on him? It's weird. So coming up to the next area, we got another church giant, although he's wielding like a kind of a Morning Star-esque mace, or like a cannonball, attached to a chain, whatever you want to call it. Behind him there's a Wandering Madness, so I'm going to try to sprint ahead and kill that, and not get killed by the giant itself. Well, that was a spectacular failure. It says perhaps the bone marrow where the blood is formed has a higher concentration of blunt hinge or whatever. You can use it for various anti-beast things like bullets and incense. Yeah, it is a bit unclear how that all does tie together. We do know like bone marrow is like where stem cells and things like that are harvested, and like there's a bunch of stem cells in the eyes, which, oh well, could relate to like the whole like blood echo and thing that they've got going on there. But that's a bit too pseudo-scientific, I feel, for like this kind of game. Like the cosmic horror relies on the unknown, and so trying to like talk about it diminishes some of its value. So right now the doll is sleeping. There's that like little dim black bar at the bottom of the screen. Pressing X will make that go away. I actually don't know if her finger twitches like this, or if it'll really matter. Doesn't seem to, but I suppose it doesn't matter since she's like, I don't know, animated like this.
Ah, welcome home, good hunter. I must have drifted off. What is it you desire? Farewell, good hunter. May you...
So it definitely fascinates me that like the doll can fall asleep in a dream. Like what would she be dreaming of if she still dreamt? Doesn't make a ton of sense logically, but I mean, what really does about a lot of this game. before I forget, like, damn it. These guys who carry the lanterns, when you gain 15 points of insight, the lanterns will change, their attack patterns will change. They will be able to use more like cosmic-y, arcane style attacks, essentially spells for the Bloodborne world, and the lanterns themselves will become covered with like a bunch of eyes, like literal eyes, and it doesn't make sense because like most eyes don't grow on lanterns in real life, so. I think I'm just too early with that. Oh god, wrong way to dodge. Oh, yeah. I got clipped through the floor. Unfortunately, like you, once you kill the church servants, they kind of drop their lanterns and they just dissipate into nothingness. So it can't really show them off super well unless you like invade someone as a hostile spirit. Because at that point, like the enemies won't be aggressive towards you. Not like this. I won't worry about that for now. That's how I wanted it to go originally, but it just did not work out for me for whatever reason. Alright, so we should have enough to upgrade our weapon now. It's a bit of a shame I lost like the 6,000 echoes. So this is what I like to call like the Zelda Room. It's just filled with a bunch of pots. Unfortunately, they don't really drop anything. But we do get like a bunch of like clouds of dust from them, and so they're probably filled with incense as well, because this area is connected to the Cathedral Ward. And this door would have led into it, and I talked about this after defeating the Cleric Beast, but it just can't be accessed in the final version of the game. And then we get a bloodstone right next to the door. And that pretty much concludes it for this area. Lance McDonald has shown off like time and time again, like if you exit out of the game in this room and like reload it, Once you come into this area, it will load like the Cathedral Ward area text to just kind of reveal that like the area down there is technically like considered part of like Central Yharnam, and so this will be like a new area when you come in from that direction. So that's the Great Bridge right there. It's where we fought the Cleric Beast. So the Cleric Beast should have essentially just been like right here where this like little drop is. And if you don't kill the Cleric Beast, like it won't appear here out of sequence. You can just go there later and fight the Cleric Beast. Like you'll never see it in this area, which is a little bit of a shame, but it's probably also a good thing because it'd be a real pain in the ass to fight up here as well. Damn it, always slow with that. And that crow has their echoes. All 1,100 of them. So coming from this area where we grabbed the binocular originally, I don't think I read that actually, now that I think about it. That's like the area for where we go to fight Father Gascoigne. The aqueducts are going towards that direction. And so we can kind of, I don't think you can even really make it out that the Church of the Good Chalice is at the bottom of that. So wanted to show those off, and coming off like the little wall section of the Cathedral Ward, we see a bunch of statues of messengers lining this wall, kind of like pouring their hands out. They have really interesting faces. They kind of almost resemble like the giants of Dark Souls, but they really just more or less resemble just like dead bodies, almost like screaming. It's something that's pretty easily overlooked, so I like to show those kind of things off. And we also get some of that on this side as well. So that's it for this little section of the Cathedral Ward, and we're just going to go back through the other section down towards Old Yharnam. And then this just kind of gives us like a different vantage point of that bridge going towards Gascoigne. And unfortunately, you can't really see like a ton of Old Yharnam from either location and how it connects to the Cathedral Ward. So coming to this next area, we have like a chapel over here with a bunch of like patrolling Yharnamites and their dogs who just run into fire, I suppose. Devin says you can see Old Yharnam from the Gascoigne Bridge. Yes, I did show that off as well. At that time I didn't have the binocular, but it's not too detailed anyway, so not going to worry about that too much. So you get some more cold blood and some more Molotov cocktails, which is nice. I was running a bit low, but I don't use a ton of them anyway. So it is a little bit interesting, like the more normal Yharnamites are patrolling this portion of the Old Yharnam, or the Cathedral Ward, as opposed to like the residential area where the church servants are loitering around. So it could just show like this is closer to being like a more lower class area, despite like this gigantic chapel over here. Or maybe not like lower class, but certainly like less wealthy and probably less important like the church servants seem to be more explicitly like guarding like what the healing church deems to be important, like the areas around the gate towards the main wealthy area of the Cathedral Ward, as well as the actual Grand Cathedral itself. So coming in here, we get some like more statues of like statuettes of like dogs on like the banisters or whatever you want to call these. They do kind of resemble like gargoyles and demons as well, but I don't think there's like a ton of significance to it. It's just kind of like Gothic or Victorian architecture at work. And Devin says it's very obscure from every angle. Yeah, Old Yharnam. There aren't a ton of statues in this portion of the church, but coming out through this back way, we come into a kind of like mini graveyard, and we get to meet another friendly NPC. Forgot I had my lantern. So this man is Alfred. He's an executioner. He's part of the healing church, and he's very easily identified by the shawl draping off of his back, which is a signature of the executioners and the Holy Church in general, even though they do use like a variety of different shawl designs.
You're a beast hunter, aren't you? I knew it. That's precisely how I started out. Oh, beg pardon. You may call me Alfred, protege of Master Ligarius, hunter of vile bloods. So, what say you? Our prey might differ, but we are hunters, the both of us. Why not cooperate and discuss the things we've learned?
So this is Alfred. He uses the same voice actor as Solaire, so a lot of people are going to be automatically more friendly towards him because Solaire is like one of the most dependable NPCs of Dark Souls. The whole like praise the sun thing is attributed to Solaire, so whether or not people recognize that it's the same voice actor, they're probably going to have that kind of implicit bias towards liking him, which might work in his favor if he is whether or not he's like a reliable kind of character in terms of like the kinds of information that he'll have. So part of the reason why I mentioned that is there is a bit of a discrepancy in his Japanese dialogue, where in English he says that he's the protege of Master Ligarius and the Hunter of Vile Bloods. The Japanese instead says that he follows the teachings of Master Ligarius and he is a hunter of the Impure Blood Clan. And so one of the reasons why I bring that up is when we think of the term like protege in English, it almost seems to like embody a master and pupil relationship, something a lot more personal and close in nature, whereas if somebody says that they follow the teachings of someone else in English, there's a lot more distance to it. They might not have that kind of personal relationship that you might come to expect from a protege and their student, or their progeny, I think is the following word. And this idea of vile bloods in English is a product of the English localization. In Japanese, they're called the Impure Blood Clan, and one of the reasons why I mention that is this idea of impure vile blood is related to Canehurst, certainly, but it's also related to like blood drags and vermin and things like that. And so calling them vile blood and really pushing that kind of narrative that there's multiple types of blood, I think is a little bit of an injustice to the script. In Japanese, like that idea is a lot more muted, and it seems like all of the blood in general is impure to some extent, and it's probably because of those impurities that it really gains its power, and that really just ties together like taking this impure blood can cause people to transform into beasts. And with that all being said, it may be that for the people of Canehurst, they might have just had a stronger version or like a more impure purities in their blood that caused them to kind of have that rift or falling out with the healing church. And I'll talk about that more in detail when we do Ariana and Adeline's quests and talk to them as well. Lemon says, like a monk is a student of the Buddha. Yeah, kind of. So it's a little bit unclear whether or not Alfred is actually an executioner or someone who's trying to follow in the steps of an executioner. So I just wanted to like throw that out there. I think it's very fair to read Alfred as possibly either being more knowledgeable than he lets on or less knowledgeable than he lets on. And so just take what he says potentially with a grain of salt is pretty much all I really have to say about that. He is wearing the garb after all. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Very good indeed. Take this to celebrate our acquaintance.
So we get a fire paper from him and a gesture.
Beast hunting is a sacred practice. May the good blood guide your way.
And so part of the reason why I was harping on, like, the whole vile blood thing is when he says, may the good blood guide your way. In English, that really reinforces the idea that there's strains of good blood and bad blood, or potentially different types of blood, whereas that's not really presented so much in the Japanese, and instead he just says something along the lines of like, oh, may you have the divine blessing of blood. So it's not necessarily like the blood that they have is good or better than Canehurst's, or more pure, or whatever you want to call it, divine. It's that kind of really strong flavor difference, which I think does impact like how you can read the character and their knowledge of the world in Bloodborne. And just going back to what Devin said with like he is wearing the executioner attire after all, that's an interesting point, but I also think it's important to point out like at this point in the game, if we did attack Alfred and make him hostile, which I did accidentally do last time, not that I was trying to, he will not use the Logarius wheel. At this point he uses like the Kirk hammer. So I'll just go ahead and talk to him and finish up what he says before going through that and revealing that like the kind of weapons that he's using right now.
There must be oodles for us to share. Go on. Just tell me what piques your interest.
So I love that little bit of dialogue, that oodles we have to share. It's just, for some reason, it's just always really silly to me, and just I'll probably never get over him saying it.
As you know, the Healing Church is the fountainhead of blood healing. Well, I'm a simple hunter, quite unfamiliar with the ins and outs of the institution. But I have heard that the holy medium of blood healing is venerated in the main cathedral, and that councillors of the old church reside in the high stratum of the Cathedral Ward. If you seek blood healing, and the church is willing, you should pay them a visit.
So there are some differences with his Japanese dialogue there. Rather than just saying like that he heard that the holy medium of blood healing is venerated in the main cathedral, he instead says he's heard the holy body it originates from, like blood administration, that is. For blood administration, I've heard the holy body it originates from is enshrined within the Grand Cathedral. And one of the reasons why I bring that up is because I think that really makes it a lot clearer, to me at least, that the holy body he's referencing, the holy medium, is like the skull and the body of Lawrence, as opposed to Ebrietus or Ebritus, as some people are want to believe. I'll talk a lot about that more once we like kind of go into that area of the game, but I do think that in English, with him just saying like the holy medium is enshrined within the Grand Cathedral, still should indicate that it's Lawrence he's talking about, because it is literally like what's on the shrine of the Grand Cathedral, and Ebrietus is just kind of like cloistered up in the very bottom of the cathedral, not like enshrined in that traditional sense of the word. But to me, in the Japanese, it's a lot clearer. Like the body he's talking about is for Lawrence. So sorry for that being a little bit redundant right then.
Byrgenwerth is an old place of learning, and the Tomb of the Gods, carved out below Yharnam, should be familiar to every hunter. Well, once a group of young Byrgenwerth scholars discovered a holy medium deep within the tomb. This led to the founding of the Healing Church and the establishment of blood healing. In this sense, everything sacred in Yharnam can be traced back to Byrgenwerth. But today, The college lies deep within a tangled wood, abandoned and decrepit. And furthermore, the healing church has declared Bergenworth forbidden ground. It's unclear how many of its scholars remain alive, but only they know the password that allows passage through the gate.
His dialogue there is pretty similar with the Japanese. I'm not too worried about it. As far as like the overall message of that is concerned, I'm a bit curious as to like how the player already seems to know about Bergenworth. It seems like we're the ones who breached that subject and bring it up to Alfred, but up until this point in the game, we've really had no indication of what Bergenworth is or was. In my opinion, it would have made a lot more sense for this dialogue to not be available to us until after we've already touched the skull of Lawrence, and we get that whole thing with Willem and Lawrence and like the whole adage of Bergenworth. But it does call into question whether or not like the hunter had knowledge of Bergenworth before we even set out on our journey. So take that as you will, and cool man, aka Herbert, it's nice to see you again, and for joining the streams. Isn't Holy Body there like the Eucharist, meaning the blood of Christ is enshrined there, and it's a source of blood administration? Let me double check. So no, it's more like it's literally like holy and then body. And it's what became like the source of like the grand cathedrals. Blood administration is what he's saying. So in this case, he does not use that kanji that's used for like communion and like the Eucharistic sense of the word, if that's even a word. So Devin also says purity is the falsehood. It's all bad. I agree with you. Maybe not perhaps all bad. I feel like that's a bit of a moral judgment, an individual moral judgment that a person can make, but it certainly has a lot of bad side effects. So Bergenworth is mentioned in the note found on the way up to Cathedral Ward. Oh yeah, that is true, the Bergenworth spider. Okay, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I kind of forgot about that. So that's it for Alfred right now.
I bid you farewell. It has been a pleasure. May the good blood guide your way.
And we already talked about that in the good blood. I do want to point out, like on his chest, we've got the symbol of the hunter rune. So there is like some kind of affiliation with hunters in the healing church. So just to kind of show off that he might be a kind of imposter, executioner. I'm gonna aggro him a little bit.
Just what is the meaning of this? Why turn your blade on me?
Maybe it won't happen yet. I know he can get de-aggroed later. Alright, whatever. I'll do it later, I think, over by the Forbidden Woods, to show that he uses the Kirk hammer instead of the Logarius wheel. Because right now he won't drop anything related to the executioners. Like, you don't get the wheel hunter badge from him at this point in the game, unfortunately. Because it would be really cool to like get the Logarius wheel early in the game if you wanted to go that route. Well, it'd be extremely expensive. So yeah, we picked up another Madman's Knowledge from the corpse in this chapel. And another one over here. So we don't have like a ton of like unique kind of architecture going on in here. However, we do get this kind of tomb which opens up to reveal a hidden staircase, which I like the touches of that. So Old Yharnam does connect to the Cathedral Ward, but I suppose it could be completely blocked off. It's certainly not the most practical way to move about in between locations. Just to kind of show off like this is where all those Yharnamites were from earlier. And so Herbert says, you saw another translation a while back that said that specified by Holy Body it means Eucharist, and the Eucharist is known as the Holy Body, so I don't know. Well, let me double check like his second line when he talks about Bergenworth. Yeah, I don't see it. I mean, I'll probably just look at it a bit closer later on and get back to you if I do find it. But yeah, I don't think he mentions it in that terminology. Like that terminology does show up for like the communion rune specifically, and it showed up earlier in the stream when I was looking at something, but I can't quite remember off the top of my head what it was. Some more bloodstone shards, although at this point they're a little bit redundant. And then just going back over the architecture here, we get a very dark room. It's filled with urns, potentially with incense, although they don't seem to be doing a good job, so we've got that random Scourge Beast just kind of hiding about. It's kind of funny, like how obviously he's just planted in this room if you know about him, but like the first time I came down here, I certainly did not see him at all. I was scared the crap out of when it just popped out of nowhere and attacked. And so we've got like a kind of dilapidated staircase going into this next area. I think I skipped the antidotes, which are a pretty good grab. Oh, it's the other way? So that's our first clue as to what we're going to come into contact with as we go into Old Yharnam. And I'll read those in just a second. We get some more pungent blood cocktails. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the dream and reinforce the weapon and level up a little bit. So Herbert says, you can kind of see it referring to Lawrence if it's making Lawrence into a Christ-like figure, like blood ministration comes from Lawrence since he's the leader of the healing church, but it's unusual to refer to a person as a source like that. I can see what you mean by that, but I do think like since Lawrence is like, especially in the DLC, like literally put into the position of Christ, as far as like being like reclined on that like kind of chair, it's most certainly inspired by like the Pieta sculpture by Michelangelo on display in the Notre Dame. Like it's, I don't think there's really any other way to read Lawrence as than like a Christ-like figure. Devin says a lot of people believe holy medium refers to the Ebriatus, but you don't know about that. I don't think it does for a variety of reasons. I'll certainly go into a lot of long-winded explanations about that when we get closer to it. But as for now, like I said earlier, she isn't necessarily like enshrined in the literal sense of the word, so that's one of the reasons why, at least for this point in the game, I don't think that description really matches up with her. Another reason would be like
welcome home. What?
You don't see any tools for blood ministration hanging around her when you do encounter her. So that's
Farewell,
pretty spot on the
hunt,
money as far as like leveling up goes. So that kind of worked out. I'm gonna go back to Old Yharnam. Devin says she spits out blood, but she doesn't seem like a source for it or anything. I agree, and also like once you look at the Great Eyes chalice which he drops, it points out that Ebriatus wasn't encountered until the time of the choir, which logistically does not work out very well for the healing church since the choir wasn't established until fairly late in the healing church timeline. Maybe fairly late is a bit of a stretch, but it certainly wasn't around at the beginning of the healing church. So Herbert says you think it's more intuitive to read it as special blood is enshrined in the church and blood administration comes from that blood either way. So the way that it is written in Japanese, it's more like the holy body, like holy medium, does make sense, but I think in this case it's supposed to be a little bit more literal than figurative. So coming into this next area, we get a boarded up door with a notice on the surface of it. This town is long abandoned. Hunters not wanted here. And then we can kind of ignore that warning like a jackass and push into the next area. Some people have told me they didn't realize like you could just interact with the door again to open it, so they thought, oh, I shouldn't be here yet. And they just turned away and missed out on Old Yharnam.
You there! Hunter! Didn't you see the warning? Turn back at once. Old Yharnam, burned and abandoned by men, is now home only to beasts. They are of no harm to those above. Turn back, or the hunter will face the hunt.
So that voice warning us comes from Jura. You can kind of make him out from this distance already. He's right above where the reticle is, although very, very hard to make out. He does warn us that, like, if we continue to advance into Old Yharnam, we will face the hunt, and that means like he will hunt us and shoot at us with his Gatling gun. And it's not going to be a very pleasant journey from this point forward. Although coming through like this route right now, we're not in his range. And I think his Japanese dialogue is pretty similar. Not too worried about that right now. So I do like we come into this area and we have a different variety of enemy. These are the beast patients. We've seen a couple of them like already crucified in Central Yharnam, but this is our first encounter with some live ones. We've got another one chilling in this like little blind spot, so a little bit of an environmental hazard for those who aren't being particularly vigilant. So examining the beast patients, they do seem to be a lot more humanoid in nature, although they have like 3 toes on their feet, which kind of could show like a bit of a regression, especially since like certain enemies like the Celestial Emissaries and Amygdala are shown to have more digits. Potentially the idea being like having more brain power allows one to have more finer or more fine like motor control over their limbs and their digits. So we gained the Hunter's Torch in this area, which does give a bit more information on what's going on here. So trying to catch up with chat real quick. Herbert says, because Alfred is giving you information about the healing church, and if he tells you to go to the Grand Cathedral, if you're looking for blood, so it makes more sense to me that he's like, you can find blood here because this is the place that's all about blood. I think that reading is certainly valid. Like, Alfred certainly doesn't know a lot about it. So for him, like, the idea that the Grand Cathedral, as like the main institution of the healing church, controls blood administration and all forms of it, they would certainly know about special kinds of blood. So to him, it's pretty much all going to tie back into, oh well, they know that the blood comes from the Grand Cathedral, so it's smart to try to go there if you can. Instead of going back to what Herbert said, instead of like you can find blood here, and by the way, the guy it came from is worshipped on the altar. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think Alfred himself knows exactly what he's talking about, but I think like the ultimate message behind what he's trying to convey is like that medium that he's heard about should be a reference to Lawrence, whether or not he's objectively aware of that being the case. So the Hunter's Torch is a torch formed by wrapping a pine resin drenched cloth around the end of a long stick, once used in Old Yharnam. Designed to incinerate beasts and victims touched by the scourge, its fire damage is highly effective against beasts. So there is a bit of a flavor difference. The Hunter's Torch doesn't really mention that certain beasts possess a deathly fear of flame. Let me just double check the Japanese on the torches to see if there's a difference. Yeah, it's pretty similar. One thing that I wonder about is how a torch is designed to incinerate those who've been inflicted with the scourge as opposed to just a regular torch, but whatever, can't really parse what that means. This next area we get a shortcut door, which of course will not open from the side. it'll be relevant later on for accessing like the boss area a bit quickly. The statues in this area do change quite a bit from what we've seen in like Central Yharnam and the Cathedral Ward. We've got these things which do resemble the messengers on like the side of the Cathedral Ward over by the Great Bridge, and then we've also got like a more avian type of depiction of them, or perhaps more like a crow type image of them. Whether or not like these messenger type things are supposed to be related to these crows is not completely clear. I think there's that good potential for that reading, especially if like crows are like come from the heavens, and like the idea of a sky burial being related to the hunter's dream could tie into like messengers being related to the hunter's dream. Since Old Yharnam is potentially like the oldest district in Yharnam, it would make sense like that religious beliefs could have changed over time. Before the Healing Church came into power, like those images might have already existed. So with this little side area out of the way, let's catch up with chat and then proceed on to the next area. Herbert says, it took you a while to realize they would have burned a ton of untransformed people too. Yeah, on these pyres you do get like a lot more skeletons, or although that might be more of a Central Yharnam thing. We should double check. Especially with how the Scourge impacts your ability to tell who's a beast and who's human. Yeah. And then that will come into play a bit more later when we get like I can't remember which set. The Herod set? No, that's super late. There's another set, I just can't think of what it is off the top of my head. So the statues here have like a bunch of the kind of women in robed figures like peering towards the skies and covering their faces. We'll find a bunch of these in like the Upper Cathedral Ward and Cathedral Ward, but we don't get like a ton of information to really figure out what these are supposed to represent. And there do seem to be like bastardized versions of these things in Yahar'gul, we will discover later on. We do get a very rare statue of like a full-on griffin in this area, and of course the infamous floating statues of Old Yharnam. There's no real deep lore behind that. It's just a glitch of like two statues colliding together. My inside joke about this is it resembles potentially one of their reference photos of Notre Dame, where they've lifted a lot of the statue designs from. Because you can find some pictures of Notre Dame where they have like it under construction and them like holding up very similar looking statues with like cranes and things like that. So it's a little bit disappointing at times to find like a full-on like rip of something that's taken from the real world, but it is also a little bit thrilling to see where those designs have been lifted from. It is really difficult to just create everything from scratch, but it's a little bit bittersweet for both ways you want to look at it, in my opinion. Feature that got patched in, yeah. They made sure to include that lore in the game. And so some more trees, and all of the trees are dead, of course. And looking down here, we can see the arena for the Dark Beast Parl. But you can't really see Parl down there, if I remember correctly. And so, like, we could assume like Yahar'gul is like towards that way, I guess. It's kind of a mess for me, like to a piece where Old Yharnam and Yahar'gul connect together, although others have pointed that out, so I'll just kind of take them at their word for that. But all the other areas do make a lot more sense to me as far as their layouts are concerned. So going back to the idea of like the burning beast patients on these crucifixes, it gets repeated in Old Yharnam, the town that got abandoned and set ablaze. And then we also find like a bunch of figures of hanged men attached to like cranes, and it looks like they have like these little sacks around their wrists. And one idea that I have in relation to that is like this could be a kind of embodiment of the Hunter's Rune, and it might be like this shape of like being suspended upside down will allow like the impurities within a dead body to pool at the bottom of them into like these little bags, and so the people might collect these bags potentially filled with blood to drink for themselves to gain that kind of high on life. And especially if like this whole idea of impurities is related to fluids a bit literally, like the impurities should sink because they would be heavier than blood and all that.
You are a skilled hunter, adept, merciless, half cut with blood, as the best hunters are.
So what he says, a half cut with blood, that's just another like a British slang, idiom, whatever you want to call it. That just means like half drunk, or drunk with blood rather. I do like the kind of phrasing that they use there. It's pretty stylish. And I think Jura really delivers his dialogue very well as a voice actor. Or the man who plays him, not Jura, really. And Herbert says, you bet these hang dudes were made very early in developments, and they always struck you that way. Yeah, Old Yharnam is really weird. It almost seems like this entire area was made early in development, but I don't think that's actually true. I think Lance would definitely have more to say about that. Because like there's a lot of the statues and things don't really align with the other areas. I think I did see like a developer interview where someone else was like in charge of like maybe it's Cathedral Ward as opposed to like Old Yharnam, so that would explain like some of the differences. There's like some parts of like team members working on one area versus another, and so I don't know. Should definitely ask Lance more about that. So I'm not sure there's really much else I want to say about this area specifically. If I step forward a bit more, like Jura will become aggressive and he'll fire his Gatling gun right there towards us. And he'll fire that at us soon enough anyway, so I won't worry about it. You can jump off like a bunch of the ledges in Old Yharnam to kind of maybe not skip, but just like kind of work around some of the areas as well. So coming through this way evades some of Jura's attacks. If I was a bit quieter, I could have snuck up on this beast patient and done some more damage. This is a much larger beast patient. It has red eyes, which might be a little bit hard to make out sometimes. And if it attacks and hits us, it will do some poison damage. Oh, I wasn't trying to dodge that. But I'm also not trying to get grabbed. So yeah, it is almost completely poisonous with that one hit alone. And so, at least for Bloodborne, it seems there is a kind of connection with poison and red eyes. In like the Dark Souls games in general, it seems like red-eyed enemies are typically stronger and probably more filled with emotions. And so that line right there really shows that Jura has locked on with his aggro towards us. We get some more antidotes. Oh, and I did forget to read those. Alright, so that's a pretty good segue. Like that beast that hit us gave us a bit of the poison status, and then we can use antidotes to clear it. So these are small medicinal tablets that counteract poison. Used to treat ashen blood, the baffling sickness that ravaged Old Yharnam long ago. These tablets only provide short-term relief. The ashen blood ailment eventually triggered the spread of the beastly scourge. I think the Japanese overall was very similar. I think it might have just been slightly more explicit. Oh yeah, the name antidote in Japanese is literally like white medicinal pill. So this is like one of the changes in localization which I strongly favor, because it's very clear when you read antidote like what its role is supposed to be, as opposed to just like white medical pill. So I definitely appreciate that change. I suppose now that I think about it, like looking at the Japanese text, ash and blood, like the character used for ash is also used for the color gray, so it might be that their blood is supposed to be gray blood. I might want to think about that more as we go through the game, but yeah, ash and blood I don't think to be like a mistranslation or anything like that. Maybe they got a bit of some developer insight as to what this kind of illness was, but one interesting part about this to me is that these antidotes say like they only give a short-term relief to the poison, whereas like for the poison mechanic and its effects on the player, this provides like permanent relief, provided we're not still like in a poisonous source. So to me, it seems like ash and blood is blood that is poisonous on its own, and the reason why antidotes don't work on like the Yharnamites is because the blood that they have itself is poisonous. So the only thing that they could potentially like revive them from the poisonous effects of their blood would be the blood vials. As like it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense with the way like blood vials are used for the player, because like poison kind of kills a lot faster than like the blood vials provide relief in general. So that's just kind of one of the things you have to take at a surface level and accept what like the items descriptions have to say, as opposed to like the in-game mechanics, unfortunately. So Devin says the antidote description had a ton of iterations before they settled on that one. The only character that has unique blood in Old Yharnam is Blood-Starved Beast. Has like a kind of a pasty shade to it. Yeah, it has like the more green, kind of like brownish, weird looking thing to it. But I think like the Blood-Starved Beast also like its blood color is similar to like the rotted corpses down in like the aqueduct in Central Yharnam. I should pay a bit more attention to the beast patients. So coming outside, you'll see like these little urns around. These are filled with oil, and then when Jura starts firing his minigun, it can cause these things to combust and ignite in huge explosions, which do a lot of area effect damage. And so, despite Jura like being on his moral high horse about us killing beasts, he inadvertently does so fairly often. So try to clear out some of those urns before picking up the items so we don't get wrecked. And then the Kane's crowd control is superb for those for that murder of crows. Let me get some more fire paper over here. Oh, and I did forget to read that from Alfred. I feel like I always forget to read like a bunch of descriptions when I'm actually playing the game. Because I get distracted by an ooh piece of candy kind of thing that goes on here. Although I suppose to be fair, like Alfred has a ton of dialogue which distracts me. I forget about his fire paper. So fire paper is coarse paper that applies fire to weapons when rubbed. A hunter tool found in the Healing Church workshop. Since the tragedy that struck Old Yharnam, fire has become a staple in beast hunts and is thought to cleanse impurity. Certain types of beasts have an abnormal fear of flame. Excuse me. As far as like the item name goes, fire paper I think is a pretty good description if you interpret like the paper is something similar to like sandpaper. The Japanese for it is more like a fire file, like a nail file. So it's supposed to be like a really coarse surface that like when you rub it, it will cause it to ignite. Obviously, this is a bit more of a fantastical element to the game, especially when you compare it to bolt paper, which we can find later on. As far as it saying like it cleanses impurity in English, the Japanese for that is there's a bias towards using fire in purifying diseases. So the only reason why I'm really mentioning this now, because it's pretty minor on its own, is that like this idea of impurity is important when we examine like the vile bloods, because they are the impure blood clan. So there is a bit more of a distance between that concept of impurity in the English of this line versus the concept of impurity for the vile bloods in general. We get some more antidotes, and we are tapped out on them. We get some blood-tinged gemstone as well. So this little tower or spiral staircase has been broken. It's a little bit unfortunate. I don't know, for some reason I always wanted to go up there, but you can't make it. And we get some more beasts prowling around in the smoke out there, and we will become exposed to Jura's Gatling gunfire. So trying to get the aggro of all these guys over here. Deal with them with the roof providing us cover. So Herbert says, looking at Aruki's rendering of the Bergenworth Alfred dialogue, he has returned to the surface from that graveyard with a certain holy body and the healing church, as well as the salvation of blood were born. You put it as divine substance instead of holy body. I like those are essentially like synonyms. Like I don't have any problem with him calling it like a holy body. Like those are like alternate readings of like the same like literal kanji. Like the first word is like literally holy, which is synonymous with divine, and then like body could be like medium, or it could be like a literal body, like one that a human has. But if you think there's like a bit more significance to like Aruki's version of the text, I'm totally interested in discussing that as well. And then we get some Cold Blood Do 3, which is not really worth risking your neck for it. And then we get another statue of a griffin, and then we can see like the kind of mini astral clock tower, which Jura's kind of chilling out on top of. And then Jura has like a little hunter ally over here, whose AI like breaks on these stairs. I'm not gonna worry about him too much right now. Trying to think about what I want to do first. If I want to leave Jura for this playthrough. I think I might just come now, since we've already shown him off from the Yahar Ghul angle where he's non-aggressive the last playthrough. So going back to Herbert, he says you're just wondering because you both said holy body was written very literally, so I was curious about why you choose divine substance there, if there's any difference in the way that it was written or what. Not sure like how to answer that question. Like divine substance, I think like I might have just gone with that just because Alfred seems unsure of what that is. So I feel like divine substance is probably a bit more contextually relevant to what he was saying there, because he's talking about different kinds of blood. So that is probably why I chose that over there. And so yeah, okay. As far as like this fight with Jura goes, if you kind of climb up the ladder and then just bum rush him and spam some R1s, you can knock him off the edge very easily. You won't be able to get his items this way unless you reload the game, so that's what we're going to do for now. So Herbert says, because if Holy Body is right, then it's being indicated that it's probably referring to the blood, since presumably Lawrence wasn't retrieved, and that would inform the source of the blood thingy. I think there's a couple points that I would like to make in like response to that. I think the Ark of the Covenant looking like thing underneath like the chair in the Grand Cathedral probably is a coffin which houses the actual body of Lawrence, and so it might just be that his skull is on display. If you disagree with that, that's completely fine as well. I think calling it the what do you want to say, like Holy Body is also a bit relevant, because when you look at the note in the Grand Cathedral itself, it talks about like the purveyor of the ministration has to like inscribe Master Lawrence's adage onto their flesh. So I think it really shows that even if like you might not interpret Lawrence as like a holy or like a divine substance the way that I have it written, sure, I could see like disagreements there. Like the fact that he would be like the holy body that serves as the fountainhead or the source of the healing church still makes sense, because he is like the founder of the religion. So whether or not you choose to interpret like the holy body as being the blood specifically or Lawrence, I think can be argued either way, if that makes sense to you. And you believe that could inform the source of blood thingy. Okay. So yeah, after defeating Jura, we get the Powder Keg Hunter Badge. So I think the reason why we went with Divine Blood was just to kind of go along with what Alfred was saying, that he doesn't know the particulars of it, so he might not have like a full understanding, although I might change it to Holy Body later. I think either way it's written could just kind of, I don't know, you get to kind of have those like semantical disagreements about, which I'm perfectly fine with, and one of the reasons why I'm really glad Rookie Mania has his translations included in my spreadsheets now, because it really just does kind of add to the depth of the discussions one can have about like the lore and things like that. So I also want to thank you for bringing up Rookie Mania, because I've totally been meaning to do like that on every stream that I've done, but I've just kind of always forgotten in the midst of it. For anybody who doesn't know, Rookie Mania is another translator who's been looking at the text of the Bloodborne game for a couple years now. He's got a series on YouTube called Translation Born, all one word, and born with an E like Bloodborne. So if you're really interested in like the Japanese text and looking at things from a more linguistic perspective, I do highly recommend checking out his channel on YouTube as well. So this is the Powder Keg Hunter Badge. It's a badge crafted by the Powder Kegs, the heretics of the workshop. The Powder Kegs' adoration of complex design and big booms culminated in weapon designs that had contrast with those traditionally of the workshop. The late Powder Kegs, bless their souls, had a motto: if a weapon ain't got kick, it just ain't worth it. So as far as this item is concerned, these are called the heretics of the workshop. I think in this instance they're saying that they're heretics of like Gehrman's workshop, not the Healing Church workshop. Excuse me. Heretics of Gehrman's workshop, not the Healing Church workshop. And I suppose that's a bit arguable, because heretic could mean like you have to have a religion or something that you're a heretic of to be considered a heretic. As far as that's concerned, like the Powder Keg items fall under the church hunter weapon category within like the storage system, so take that as you may. Yeah, it's I do wish there was a bit more clarification as to like what workshop they refer to when. So the way that I'm just gonna take it like at face value, when they just say heretics of the workshop or just workshop in general, I'm going to assume that's for Gehrman's workshop, and for the other varieties of workshops that they talk about, like they'll be specific about. And so that part of the lore is a little bit messy, I'll admit myself, and probably deserves a little bit more time invested into like piecing through everything. And going back to chat, Herbert says, by the way, there's a little typo in Rookie's Healing Church dialogue that threw me through a loop. Go ahead and let me know. I'll try to let him know. Like, we tend to help each other out if we think something's wrong or something's missing in our source text, etc., etc. You've heard that the holy body source or the salvation of blood is enshrined in the Grand Cathedral. It's supposed to be of... maybe... Oh, okay. Okay, so that typo is probably my fault, because I'm the one who input his descriptions, especially if that's one of the early ones. So I'll take the blame for that. And thanks for pointing that out to me. If you would you send me a DM on Discord so that way I don't forget about it over the course of the night. Oh yeah. And so that final line about like if a weapon ain't got kick, it just ain't worth it, definitely isn't in the Japanese. However, with that being said, it really I think it really lends like a lot of good characterization to the English reading of the powder kegs. It's really punchy, it's flashy, it really symbolizes that kind of Canehurst, or not Canehurst, but powder keg bombast as well. Just for reference, the Japanese version says something closer to the now dead gunpowder kegs boasted. It's unimaginable that boring things left as they are will be good weapons. So I think that's like got a pretty good flavor to it of itself, but I feel like the English version just actually does a better job than the Japanese does in this specific instance, in like characterizing like what kind of hunters were part of the gunpowder kegs. And so now with Jura being defeated and us callously stealing his workshop badge, we're going to deal with his little hunter friend and not get shot at while we're doing it. Aw, oh, dang it. Thought I had him because he was stuck in the corner. I'm almost out of my thing, so I should stop spamming them actually. My bullets. A lot of the hunter enemies you can kind of cheese if you get them in a corner, because you can R1 spam them, and then use your gun to keep them like a little bit stun locked while you recover your stamina. Oh, he healed. I do such little damage right now, it's funny. So yeah, the reason why I cheesed Jura and knocked him off the tower is because he's really actually tough to kill in this early of the game, as a lot of the hunters tend to be. I suppose I should have shown off a little bit more of Jura's dialogue about like killing the player. I'll definitely try to make sure I do that like the next run. Because I'm thinking like next run that I do will probably like take place in a month, a little bit after the PS5 gets released. I'm considering doing like a 1.0 playthrough of the game just to like kind of highlight the differences between like, the different patches of the game, especially like if the PS5 does for whatever reason like upscale some of the features of Bloodborne. It'd be pretty nice to like get that kind of a compare and contrast, I think, between like the very base version of the game and what they patched it into. So this is another kind of like a hidden area in Old Yharnam. It's pretty unintuitive to just kind of like roll off the cliff towards it. It's a lot easier to get to now that Jura isn't trying to shoot us in the back with all those crows and things like that. And this building is infested with a bunch of beast patients, and there's really a lot of them, and they just kind of like keep coming in different waves. So it's important to I don't even have antidotes equipped now that I think about it. Not my favorite way to deal with a group of enemies, but it worked out, so I'll take it. Oh, I jumped forward instead of backstepping. I needed those vials, so that's pretty welcome. And fortunately there are no mimics in this game to worry about your uncontrollable greed. So we get another gemstone from there. And there aren't any other chests here, just like a bunch of furniture. We will get a few more items on the next floor, as well as the very important lore notes. I saw it go upstairs, but... okay, there it is. So, this item over here is pretty easy to miss because it's in your blind spot when you're coming up here. It doesn't glow enough to really make it stand out, so you really have to kind of swivel the camera around to see it or come back down the stairs. This gives us the rifle spear, which says that it is a trick weapon crafted by the workshop heretics, the powder kegs. A prototype weapon serving as a simple firearm and spear, possibly created in imitation of a lost Cainhurst weapon. Lacks any notable functions, saving that it is the only trick weapon with an attached gun. So, I do think there is probably a bit of a design influence on the powder kegs through the Otto workshop, and obviously because they descended from the Otto workshop, but I wanted to say influence from Cainhurst through the Otto workshop into the powder kegs, because the firing hammer badge of the Otto workshop is the kind of same firing hammer that's found on the Evelyn and the Reiter Palash weapons of Cainhurst. And so for this description, when it talks about a lost Cainhurst weapon, it's not saying a lost weapon from Cainhurst, it's saying like the ruined Cainhurst, the lost Cainhurst, because it's been destroyed from the raid by the Healing Church. This calls it a prototype in English. I think it says that as well in Japanese. Let me look at it again. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I do find it interesting that it says like this is the only trick weapon that's also a gun, because it makes it sound as though the Reiter Palash itself is not a trick weapon, and so maybe the weapons from Cainhurst aren't considered trick weapons. I don't really know how that works out. So we get another lore note here. It says, "The red moon hangs low, and beasts rule the streets. Are we left no other choice than to burn it all to cinders?" And so this idea of the red moon hanging low becomes really relevant when we find out that the red moon makes an appearance on this night of the hunt. It ties in together that when the red moon appears, the outbreak of the Scourge of Beast is extremely magnified to the point that they will abandon a complete section of the city, and that's probably why our night of the hunt is so bad, and why it's a long night of the hunt, and why so many people have already transformed over the course of the night. So, that's pretty much it for now. This will become a bit more relevant later on when we talk about like the Pale Blood Sky and Ram and things like that. From this Corpse of a Hunter, we get the Charred set, which says, It's one of the staple articles of hunter attire fashioned at the workshop. A product of the scourge of the beast that once plagued Old Yharnam and culminated in the town's fiery cleansing. The cape's dampness makes it highly resistant to fire. Wearers of this attire hunted down victims of the scourge and stench of singed blood. So most of the other descriptions are the same. Instead of talking about the cape's dampness, it just says it's designed to be highly resistant to fire, and that's pretty much it. Double checking the Japanese, of course, we see that pretty much the same thing. I don't think there is anything different. Yeah, okay. And this is a window that leads back out to where Jura's friend was, and the crows from earlier. Some more cold blood from a corpse over there. And so this is like one of the hints that there is a kind of secret area in that building, because there's like that window hanging out there. I am proud to say, like in my first playthrough, I did end up finding that for myself. I'm pretty sure, like I came back through Old Yharnam because I was exploring about, and it bothered me that that window was there because it looked like you could get into the building and you couldn't jump into it. So it took me a really, really long time to actually find it, but it kind of worked out. So looking at this like little statue of a messenger here. It's next to the church. It looks a little bit more like a bird as well, and it does deviate from like the kind of messenger statues we find over by the Cathedral Ward. And now that I just brought up that statue, that does remind me to check out some of the other ones over here before I forget again. I know I've pointed out some of them earlier, like we see them over by that like shortcut as well. These ones are pretty similar to what we found earlier. We've got the messenger and the crow looking like thing. Later on we'll find like almost like pregnant looking like versions of like the crow ones, and we find some like more dead bodies, although we can't interact with them. Can't remember off the top of my head where like the pregnant looking ones were. I think they might be on the wall over there by this thing. So no, that's more like just a regular bird. And so this one looks more like a human as opposed to like a messenger. Almost looks like a nun, like it's got like a robes on or something like that. So I think that's about it for there. Some more hanged bodies. The griffin thing that I pointed out from earlier. And then like this house, you can't access it. It's closed off. And so coming towards this area, we get this like kind of bassy sound going on. These are coming from the denizens of this unnamed chapel that we're about to visit, that's filled with beast patients, which seem to be any kind of a hymn or a prayer that's going on. And it'll be obvious that it's a kind of hymn or prayer once we drop down in there and scare them and interrupt their I don't know what you want to call it, religious ceremony. Something along those lines. If you come in through the front way, this beast patient will drop down and ambush us a little bit. It's not too bad. So looking down, it's a little bit hard to make out, so we'll probably just descend a bit more before I talk about that. There's this like kind of chandelier looking like thing that has a strung up beast attached to it. That of like a most likely a blood-starved beast. They kind of share the same model. There's a bunch of beast patients down there, which are making the kind of noise that we hear right now. There's this really cool environmental trick here where if you hit this oil urn that's suspended above it, it'll like fall down and cause things to go on fire. And that will also interrupt the chanting that's going on. So we've interrupted their church mass right now, and we're just going to go ahead and try to collect all these items that are up here. Some more Madman's Knowledge. I don't know why this dude is on top of the rafters. Some more Molotov cocktails. We could just reinforce that like Old Yharnam was abandoned in flames and they used the Molotov cocktails to do it. And then way over there we get a kind of item that we have to make a jump to achieve. Or to receive, rather. This is another messenger item, a cosmetic item that we can give to the messengers at the stump. I'll read that after like all these beasts are done screaming, not that they've seen me. If I really remember to do it, because I tend to be forgetful about things like that, unfortunately. Fortunately, you do have to take a little bit of fall damage to deal with that. And then the beast patients will screech once they see you and begin to approach. You can also kite some of them into the flames. I'm not too worried about that. And you can see like some of them have already been damaged just because of the fire that we set to the corpse that's been strung up. I suppose I never showed off these things being scared of fire, now that I think about it. I don't know if we can do it to the ones with the things all over their heads. Probably not. I'm already out of bullets anyway, so. So that looks like all of the small fry from down here have been dealt with. If we try to examine this patient or blood-starved beast corpse, we see that it's still got like 5 toes on each foot. A really messed up skeletal looking like face. And it's just draped with almost what looks like to be like a red robe, but the internal files will reveal like it's its own backskin that it's self-flagellated to kind of try to suck the blood off of, which is pretty metal. And there's this giant pool of blood underneath it, which is a little bit interesting that like the blood underneath it is continuing to burn as though it's like infused with oil or something like that. I mean, sure, we did drop the oil urn, and like the blood doesn't normally burn without it, but I don't know. Maybe there's something within like the poisonous ashen blood which is a bit more flammable than regular blood. I'm not sure. Get the Madman's Knowledge from this corpse over here, and we're gonna go back up towards the rest of the area to kind of just explore everything there is here. The bloodstone shard. Okay, after I kill this thing, I'll try to look at the messenger item before I forget. Since they should be done screaming for now. So the bloody messenger head bandage, accessory adored by naive messengers, imitating the bandages of scourge victims, unaware of their meaning. The spatters of blood give it a particularly nice touch. The inhabitants of the stump appear to have an interest in adornment. Why not let them be happy and revel as babes? There is a difference in the description there. I remember it off my top of my head. I just don't remember the exact words used. It says that it's an ornament of messengers' misunderstanding. It's something mimicking the bandaged forms of those afflicted by the ailment of beasts. They were so thorough as to even apply blood to it. And so I do think that's a pretty interesting change there, because like the messengers don't understand like the reason why it's been covered in blood is something that's a pretty sad thing to do. They just see it as something common amongst those who wear bandages, so they just try to imitate it without understanding that it's because it's a product of people's suffering, essentially. It's actually a good reminder to switch my items around. So get some more antidotes, which is pretty convenient. And so I think that's everything up here. Oh yeah, we need to go and collect the other item that's over there. It's a pretty negligible cold blood do. I tend to only really use those if I'm trying to like level up my weapon or just round out the next level for my blood echoes. So coming up to this altar here, we finally get some ritual blood, which ties into what I was talking about with Garen's dialogue and the Thumer chalice description. And this is a material used in a holy chalice ritual. It's one of the basic ingredients used to satiate a holy chalice. Is this an incoagulable blood? When all is melted in blood, all is reborn. Part of the reason why I think ritual blood is related to cold blood is that it's described as being incoagulable. And the reason why cold blood is called cold blood is because it's blood which does not clot when it's found in a cold, dead body. In Japanese, it's called dead blood, as I've mentioned before. And so, when you get the higher tiers of the ritual blood, you'll also see like the skulls and the spirits of the dead kind of emerging from it, which does reinforce like the imagery of death within ritual blood. And so the fact that it's related to death, first of all, and that it's incoagulable, second of all, does really link together the idea of cold blood being filled with like the wills of the dead, and all that kind of stuff as well. And I think those all tie into the idea that blood vials restore HP, which is the willpower of the hunter. So I think essentially old blood is more like a metonym for all the kinds of like blood that they use, and they're all essentially the same thing, just called different names. So old blood used for chalice rituals is ritual blood. Old blood used for like restoring HP is blood files or transfusion fluid in the Japanese, and old blood used for like coming from dead bodies and obtaining echoes from, that's probably just cold blood essentially, or death blood or dead blood, whichever you want to call it. I do think these little figures were taken from real life. I thought I found a kind of a potential match for these. I just don't remember what it was right now. And I kind of forget. Oh, maybe not this one. This one looks different. But I thought I saw something that does resemble this, and I should have double-checked that before doing this lore through. I did find some more about like the Canehurst statues, but we'll talk about that when that becomes relevant later. So that little chapel here is dilapidated, and while it's not a named chapel, I think it is supposed to be very important because we see like the beasts essentially praying to something in here, and I think the idea could be like the beast patients were drinking this blood that was dripping from this blood-starved beast. And it could tie into why ritual blood has been venerated in this area as well. And I think it's kind of like a sister chapel to the Church of the Good Chalice, where we find the Thumru Chalice after defeating the blood-starved beast. And so, right over there is the Church of the Good Chalice, as I mentioned before. When we were in Central Yharnam, we saw that like the little sewers were like right next to the church right there. So they would connect like right here, or perhaps over there. Although we don't really see... Maybe it's on the back side over there where it's supposed to connect. So yeah, okay, I think maybe there in the distance... Where like the reticle should be, might be where like that ladder would be. I don't think it really matches up. I think Lance looked at it once and it was just kind of pretty rough altogether. But that's the church, or not the church, but the bridge, which connects Central Yharnam to the Cathedral Ward and all that kind of stuff over there. Below us we see a river running next to Old Yharnam and the Chalice there. It's a little bit hard to make out, like the assets for it aren't particularly fantastic. Like that white moving thing in the distance is like the water, essentially. And so, if the Grand Cathedral or whatever did like use poisonous water in some of its experiments for like the research patients, it wouldn't be too much of a shock to discover like they were polluting the water source that would run into Old Yharnam. Because water obviously flows downhill, and so if they were to dispose of it, it'd most likely go to Old Yharnam of all the places that it could go. Also, just like to tie into like some of the Dark Souls thematics that they've got going on. Like Blighttown is like at the base of the wall in like by Firelink Shrine and like Anor Londo, or not Anor Londo, but like the Undead Burg, and it's being like infested with, or not infested, but it's like at the base of where they would the Undead Burg and whatever would send its sewage towards, and like I think the same idea would apply to Old Yharnam. Like the canals of Central Yharnam are sewage canals in Japanese, so like if their sewage is flowing towards Old Yharnam, like it's a real shocker that they would become infected there. So yeah, coming down into this area, we get a bunch of like ambient smoke, and we see like the bodies of like actual people, or at least certainly not as transformed beasts, which comprise these types of pyres. And these little beast patients are just kind of like hiding in between them. I'm surprised I aggroed that, because I didn't go too far back in there. a lot of the enemies in Bloodborne, like they will punish like backwards movement, and it's a little bit counterintuitive, but you're really a lot safer like going towards them and like behind them in many cases. Like it's not foolproof, of course, but just it's something which is kind of interesting as far as the dynamics of combat going here. Blood pellet from that Scourge Beast there. I'll examine that in a moment. And coming back here, we have the gate that leads toward Yahar Ghul and the Dark Beast Parl, although you can't access it from this side. There's like not even a prompt that says it's closed. Or I guess I'm totally wrong there. It does not open from this side. So beast blood pellets are large medicinal pellets supposedly formed of coagulated beast blood, banned by the Healing Church due to their unclear origin, grants a spirit of beasthood. Ripping apart the flesh of one's enemies and being rained upon by their splattering blood invigorates one's sense of beasthood, feeding strength and euphoric feeling alike. Let's double check that description. So there's a bit of a difference. Rather than saying they banned it because of their unclear origin, the Healing Church banned it without understanding it, and they denied like being connected to it. So that's kind of interesting, and the last part is pretty same, like semantically. It's just a bit toned up in the English, in my opinion, for making it I don't know, just a little bit more dialed up in relation to like the terminology that they use. Like saying like euphoric feelings and stuff like that is a bit strong, I think. I forgot to show this off before you. So there's a Scourge Beast chilling up on this kind of caged window, and if you try to loot this item, it'll drop down and potentially jump scare you because it wasn't there before. And we get some more beast blood pellets, some more bloodstone shards. So the fact that it does talk like beast blood pellets are potentially formed from coagulated beast blood is interesting to consider, because we know that like, cold blood itself doesn't coagulate, ritual blood doesn't coagulate. However, that being said, like the blood shards and things like that are supposed to come from something which does not like stay liquid within the blood. So their origins and their nature are still unclear despite everything we've talked about so far. And I don't really have strong opinions one way or another as to whether or not they are coagulated. I've seen some pretty interesting theories on Reddit that like maybe the beast blood pellets are like somewhat similar to like owl pellets, in that like they're more or less the feces of the Scourge Beast and things like that, because you can get some more from like the suspicious beggar after he eats the NPCs we've sent to the Cathedral Ward. So that opens up the shortcut. I'm just going to go ahead and level up at the Hunter's Dream and replenish all the Quicksilver bullets in my inventory, and maybe buy some things from the inside shop before I forget about them, and to show off that we got a Jura set accessible to us now. And then I intend to deal with the blood-starved beast and cut the stream for the night. I do tend to want to stream for about 3 hours, but I pretty much always go over, and that's fine, but I suppose I could do better with being a bit more consistent in that regard. Or maybe talk less, I don't know.
Welcome home, good hunter. What is it you desire? Very well,
I'm gonna go ahead and increase my damage for now.
Farewell, good hunter.
Now that I've got a bit more stamina and health. Can't upgrade that anymore. And so Gehrman is gone, and he leaves us this note. It says, a holy chalice is said to be enshrined in Old Yharnam, seated in the valley. Pretty much his last bit of dialogue that he gave to us. And so from the Insight shop, we can buy Gascoigne set as well as Jura set. And we get the Grey Wolf cap and the Ashen set. So this is attire of the retired hunter Jura. This worn wolf cap was his trademark. Jura is known through his contact with the powder kegs, the heretics of the workshop. He is said to have been both uncommonly kind and dreadfully foolish. Jura felt defeated by the state of Old Yharnam and renounced his hunter's vows. There is a bit of a difference in the Japanese for that. Quite a few. Instead of saying that Jura is a retired hunter, he is actually just an old hunter. They use the exact same kanji as old hunters, although of course in the base version of the game, like, old hunters weren't as relevant as what was discussed with the DLC. So I don't know why they went with retired hunter. I think the Korean also has it as like old hunter. I don't remember off the top of my head though. The other part is in the second paragraph where he talks about it talks about him being uncommonly kind and dreadfully foolish. The Japanese says like he was tender-hearted and therefore a foolish man. So it's a pretty interesting correlation that they have there, in that because Jura sees Beast as being a people, he is a foolish man because of like those kind of altruistic beliefs, and that gets a bit reinforced in like the Hunter's Axe description, which says like beasts are no longer human. So that just does reinforce that Jura's beliefs are a bit that of a like a bleeding heart. So looking at Gascoigne set, a lot of it's similar. The garb itself is a little bit different. So we're going to look at the cap and then the garb. This is hunter attire worn by Father Gascoigne. Similar to hunter garb created at the workshop, only these are tainted by a pungent beastly stench that eats away at Gascoigne. Father is a title used for clerics in a foreign land, and there is no such rank in the healing church. I think the Japanese for that was pretty straightforward as well. The term that they use for father is what they use for the Catholic Church members, if I remember correctly. I should double check that. Right, and so it looks like everything else is pretty similar. This does reinforce that Gascoigne himself was a foreigner at some point, because there is no title for father in the healing church. And when we look at his garb, it says, the dingy scarf is a holy shawl and symbol of the healing church, from which Gascoigne would eventually part ways. So this reveals that while Gascoigne was at one point affiliated with the church, he is no longer. Despite that, he still wears the shawl, which symbolizes like membership in the healing church, and that's one of the ways that Adela will accept the player character as like a member of the healing church. And so I think that's it for now, and we can go back and deal with the blood-starved beast and finish up Old Yharnam. I really out of bullets? Did I just not notice that? That's a little bit unfortunate. Certainly not necessary for the blood-starved beast, but... So that a little bit of extra skill helps us kill those Scourge Beasts in one stamina bar's worth of energy. I did forget to confirm whether or not that beast patient does buff this Scourge Beast over here. I've heard that's true. This Scourge Beast does have red eyes. When he attacks, he can inflict poison damage, and when you kill him, you get him low on HP, he'll have the poison bar fill up as well. Although this time it doesn't happen for whatever reason. I don't know, it's weird how that works out. And so this is another residential district of Old Yharnam. We get some more houses, things like that. Bunch more of the hanging suspended bodies. Some more of the statues over here. And there'll be another Wandering Madness on these steps coming up here. So these things are called either Wandering Nightmares or Wandering Madnesses. They are probably related to the Nightmares in general, and they seem to be comprised of a bunch of skulls, people of the dead, and they have more tendril-like appendages, and they seem to struggle with their movements as though they're a bunch of disjointed organisms kind of combined into one thing. So I think that will become a bit more relevant later on, especially as we continue to examine Insight and its function in the Bloodborne universe. Let's get some more bold hunter's marks, and we should get Alfred's summoning bell right here. Since we've already talked to him. Maybe I should do it just to show it off. I don't know, I just kind of don't feel like it. Sometimes having the NPC hunters makes it harder to deal with the bosses, because they kind of it becomes harder to read the AI, because it'll toggle between characters and just kind of differ its patterns of attacks. I should mention, in this version of the game, with the DLC included, you use the Old Hunter Bell to summon Alfred, and the messengers are kind of holding that up. In 1.0 version of the game, you use the Beckoning Bell to summon Alfred, which is a pretty interesting change, because they didn't have the Old Hunter Bell before the DLC got released. So that's pretty much it. And earlier when we were in the Central Yharnam, I did show off these are the steps that do lead to the Church of the Good Chalice, and this is just kind of reinforcing what I was talking about much earlier in the stream. So coming into the Church of the Good Chalice, we will encounter the blood-starved beast. I always forget that it's like pretty susceptible to pungent blood cocktails, so I might try to use that this run. I don't really have too many issues with the Blood-Starved Beast, but I tend to be bad at using the items in general, so let's try it out. So visceraling the Blood-Starved Beast, it kind of gets that like grayish, greenish blood going on. And it's kind of got a continuous spurt of blood on its back this entire fight. Coming into close proximity will allow it to kind of give an ambient poison effect on its last phases. And if you get it hit at this point in the fight, it's pretty devastating because it deals a ton of damage and will pretty much poison you immediately. So defeating the Blood-Starved Beast, we get the Thumer Chalice as well. I did talk a little bit about it, in that, like, the internal files will say that the Blood-Starved Beast is the self-flagellated beast. I think in the alpha version of the game, when you look at its soul, and it has like the little description for it, or its living liver rather, and so it's flayed the back of itself with in an attempt to like kind of drink the blood that it's already inside. And so its name in Japanese is the Kawaita Kemono, which literally just means like the dried beast or like the thirsty beast. The kanji that they use for it is like bloodthirsty beast. It's a homophone for like dried as well. So I think it's a pretty good like play on words that like the bloodthirsty beast is possibly thirsty because it's been already dried of blood. But I'm not entirely sure if that's intended or it's just like a coincidence, or if it's a no pun intended kind of intended pun, if that makes any sense. So now that the Blood-Starved Beast has been defeated, we can examine a lot more of the cathedral. That's the Church of the Good Chalice. We get this kind of imagery of a person that's dead, with these three women looking up to the skies for guidance. I think this person on this like altar here could be a kind of representation of Lawrence, and then the women around him could either be like the followers of the Healing Church, or like potentially like his vicars which follow him and are like going to take up his mantle as like the leaders of the Healing Church. This imagery does resemble that of like Mary and Jesus, and those kind of I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head for some reason. I know what they're called, I just can't think of it. That's unfortunate. Pretty much when there's like a whole bunch of like symbols in Catholicism of like the death of Jesus and Mary, like kind of like crying over his body, or like looking up to God and praying for guidance and stuff like that. So I think that imagery is also like reinforced here. You got like a number of people like kind of clustered over like this kind of body figure in the middle. It's really hard to make out. And behind this altar, we get some antidotes. So this like little alcove did bother me for a while. I wondered if at some point in development they were thinking of like connecting the back of the Church of the Good Chalice to either like the Chalice dungeons back here or like the Forbidden Woods. I asked Lance if there was anything about that. We couldn't really find anything in the files to confirm or deny that stuff. Sundry Saturns is La Pieta. Yeah, I did mention that earlier. I know there's another term for it, like that's a specific statue, I think, or a few statues, but oh well. I'll probably remember it later and kick myself for it. So these statues over here are also really interesting because we don't really get them anywhere else. They've kind of like got these fat bearded men. I've said in the previous stream, or the previous lore through rather, these figures right here do resemble like one of the earlier mascots for like the Project Beast phase of the game development, where they got like these kind of like fatter pig-looking like beasts, and you can even see enemies which are similar to these in the Chalice dungeons. Like they'll wield like halberds as well, and they're more beast-like. And so this figure is certainly resembles the other one. It's thinner. It's got these bandages which are getting unraveled from it, which I think could show that the plague or the illness that it might be inflicted by isn't going to keep it chained or fettered down. And so because it's looking to the sky, like it could show that like the blood is like the healing principle which can like set people free. And this guy is also looking towards the sky, although he's got almost like a proned position in I don't know, reverence of potentially like the healing blood and all that. So I think that's pretty much it for tonight's stream. I do want to thank everybody for stopping by and commenting, even if you couldn't stay the whole time. I will be uploading these to YouTube, and I will continue these lore streams at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night until we finish, unless something comes up. If you're interested in like getting those alerts or talking more about the lore of Bloodborne, I've also got my links to the Discord server below in my channel description as well. So once again, thank you everybody for stopping by, and have a good night.